My boyfriend's ex sent him nude pictures, so I confronted him and found out he had been cheating throughout our entire relationship. It's finally gaining some traction. I won't name the podcast because of privacy concerns and the fact that I appear in some of the episodes. He's far from famous, but he's gaining recognition. I used to be the major co-host, but I've been too busy with work lately to be really active on the podcast. Obviously, you cannot have a podcast with just one person. It would be dull. So Isaac informed me that he had found someone to be a more consistent co-host when I was unavailable. I told him that was fantastic and inquired who it was. He told me her name was Abigail and even provided me her Instagram. It didn't appear that he was hiding anything, so everything seemed okay. About a week later, we were having dinner with our friend group when Isaac's best friend Josh commented in front of everyone that he was astonished by how fine I was with Isaac working with his ex-fling. Let's just say my reaction was polar opposite of cool. I was more outraged that Isaac had lied to me than anything else. Why would he feel compelled to lie about something like that? I like to think of myself as quite laid back about these things. Would I felt awkward? Yes, but the show is taped at the apartment Isaac and I share and I highly doubt he is cheating on me. We're really serious and have even discussed marriage recently. But what about the fact that he was lying? That's the only red flag he's ever showed me and it just feels strange. When we went home, I made him tell me about it. He told me that approximately a year before we met, he had a friends with benefits relationship with Abigail. Apparently, he stopped relations with her because he desired something more serious, with labels, but she refused. Again, not really disturbing, but he lied to me. The way his best friend expressed it, almost in awe, as if the concept was unfathomable, made me believe there was more to the story. I told Isaac that I wasn't comfortable with him working with Abigail. If he felt compelled to lie about working with an ex-fling, it was probably not the best decision. He stated that if I was unable to co-host the show, he required someone to do so on a regular basis. I told him he'd have to find someone else because I wasn't comfortable with the situation. I emphasized that I would have been fine with it if he hadn't lied, but he squandered the opportunity. I even went so far as to imply that if he continued talking to her, I might have to reassess our relationship. He eventually consented, but he has been giving me the silent treatment for the past few days. Our friends are aware of what occurred as a result of the mid-dinner announcement. They're split 50-50. Some of my friends suggest I should give him a break because he didn't mean to lie and didn't want to harm my feelings. They insist that Isaac is a decent person. But now I have a very horrible feeling about it. I'm scared that I overreacted. Other things like this have happened previously, now that I think about it, but so many of our friends believe I'm overreacting to a minor mistake. I believe they might be correct. Small things like this have happened before, but the truth is that I adore Isaac. I am willing to keep trying for him, but I can't get rid of this bad feeling in my gut. My friends suggest I should keep talking to him about it, but I have no idea what to say at this point. I urgently need some guidance. Edit. For those who are rushing to break up, I'd want to clarify that I genuinely like this man. We have been dating for 4 years. We have a child. Well, I'm kidding. She's a cat. I recognize that terminating things may be the only option, but right now I'd like to focus on advice rather than hearing how I should end things. Isaac has been with me through one of the most difficult times in my life, the loss of my sister. He is strong, kind, and in the best possible way an airhead. If we have to break up, we'll alter gears, but right now all I need is some brutal honesty and advice on what to speak to him. Edit. He does have another job because we can't live on my income and the show alone. He works today, while I work evening. I'll only have an hour to speak with him, and I want it to be a long conversation. So I'll wait till I'm off on Friday. I'm not sure what I'll say yet, but I will figure it out. Thank you for all of your responses, and I will keep you updated. Update 1, August 3, 2024. I hope this reaches everyone who watched and commented on my post. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who helped me think of things to ask him. I can't thank you enough. I was diagnosed with acute anxiety when I was 10 years old. I spent the entire morning pacing and had a little anxiety attack before speaking with him. Normally, things like this would make me cry, no matter how big or small, but I'm happy to say I stood my ground. He gave me coffee this morning, as he almost always does. He has been chatting to me more lately, yet there is still this strange barrier between us. He kissed my forehead and we had breakfast together. He told me about job, and everything felt so right. But deep down, I knew that nagging feeling wouldn't go away unless I talked about Abigail. So in the most awkward way possible, I said, "We need to talk." Isaac grimaced and then nodded, shocking me with the words, "We do." 1 point for anxiety. We talked for around 2 hours. I will recap our chat. The first question I asked was how long they had been in contact. He informed me they met in a psychology class at college and were in the same study group. This piled up, as I know he's still connected to that group. Some of the guys, including Josh, are his best pals. He informed me they maintained in touch via group chat but had not chatted one-on-one until recently. The second question I asked was why he didn't inform me. I teared up as I asked, and he instantly began apologizing excessively. I told him that it hurt to hear it from Josh rather than from him. He explained, I didn't think it was a big problem. I realize it's foolish, but I didn't think about it. He stated that they aren't close friends and she merely seemed like a nice alternative for me until I could get back to being active on the program. I asked him why he chose her. He added that he wanted to cover more issues about college life, classes, and study strategies, and she was a good fit because she was a part of his life at the time. He told me that he loves me and did not mean to hurt me. He stated that he knew it would make me uncomfortable, which is why he did not inform me. He was worried about my worry. I became upset and informed him that it was not his decision. He agreed, apologized, and promised not to do it again. He also stated that Abigail will no longer be a part of the program, and that he did not want to make me uncomfortable on purpose. I agreed, claiming I did not want her on the podcast. Then the tables turned. Just as I thought everything was good, he said something unexpected. There's something else. She sent me nudes. What the, __. I felt my heart shatter a little and wondered how he replied. He showed me the texts, which were 2___ days old. He said, I'm flattered but I have a girlfriend. But did not block her. I requested he stop communicating with her, but he refused, claiming it would make things difficult with his friend circle. I retorted, I'm your ___ girlfriend, and yeah, this situation is already awkward. I questioned how he'd respond if Josh emailed me nudes. That hit him hard. He admitted to cutting Josh off and expecting me to do the same. He nodded, agreeing to block her. I saw him block and erase her contact. Even after that, I didn't feel satisfied. He saw the mails 2 days earlier but did not notify me. That was my breaking point. I responded, maybe honesty isn't as important to you as it is to me, but if one of your friends sent me nudes, I would tell you within minutes. I kept going, eventually breaking down in tears, and he began to cry too. He kept apologizing and explaining that he hadn't brought it up with me because he believed I was avoiding him. And he wanted to wait until he knew I was prepared to talk. This seemed like, __, since he was giving me the silent treatment. In my previous post, I stated that I was not considering breaking up, but now I am unsure. I understand that this was not the update you were hoping for, but I assure you that there will be another. I told him I needed some space. I'm a person who rarely sets limits until I'm extremely offended. He apologized and attempted to hold me, but I moved away. I'm writing from my best friend's apartment, where I'm spending the night. I told Isaac we might chat again in a few days, but for now I needed to think things through. The truth is, he cried when I mentioned ending things. Isaac never cries. The only time I've seen him cry in our 4-year relationship was when his mother died. I know he loves me, but I feel lied to. Maybe I'm overreacting, but right now I feel betrayed. I apologize and I understand this was not the update you were hoping for, but thank you to everyone. If you want to give me some advice, please do so. I'm not sure where to go next and still have questions for him. I'm also comfortable with addressing inquiries, and I'll try to keep you updated if anything else happens, good or bad. And in case you were wondering, yes, I did bring our cat with me. Update 2, August 27, 2024. I apologize for the extended time between posts. A lot has happened, and I honestly don't know where to begin, but I'll start with this. We split up. I ended up contacting Abigail. Some commentators thought it was clever, so I reached out to her on Instagram and asked for her side of the story. She didn't know who I was at first. She then seemed astonished that I had contacted her. She recognized me based on what Isaac had told her, but he said we began dating last month, not 4 years ago. This knowledge baffled me, and I wanted to know more. We met for coffee and she told me they'd been hooking up every now and then. In her words, perhaps once or twice every 6 months for years. She burst into tears and hugged me, admitting that she had no idea I'd been his girlfriend for so long. Apparently, their FWB relationship had never ended, and he had been cheating on me throughout our time together. She assured me that they were secure and that I shouldn't be concerned, but to be honest, I kind of blanked. I was with this dude for 4 years. I do not blame her in the slightest. I believe she wishes to maintain contact, but it is currently too painful to speak with her. It's not her fault, it's entirely Isaac's, but I simply can't deal with anything remotely related to him right now. I'm not sure if Josh was aware of this, but if he was, I doubt he would have mentioned it at dinner that night. I apologize for the lengthy delay in providing this update. I broke up with Isaac via text, classy, I know, and informed him that my closest friend would come by to retrieve his belongings. I also brought our cat and mentioned that I wanted to keep her. He fought the separation, claiming that couples therapy could help, but I told him that 4 years of deceit could not be fixed. I'm now living with my best friend, and we're having some serious girl time. I'm torn up, but I know this was for the best and staying would have hurt worse. Sorry for the late update and thank you for your advice. Update 3, August 28, 2024. This is the last update. I wasn't going to post this, but I felt it would be a somewhat brighter conclusion for some of you and frankly, for me as well. Josh ended up phoning me yesterday night. I didn't respond at first, fearing that Isaac was attempting to reach me through him. However, after the third call, I did. This guy sounded angry. The first words he spoke were, "My name, I am so, __, sorry." He didn't give me a chance to say anything before going off on a tangent about Isaac being a jerk and how he couldn't believe he'd been best friends with him for so long. He told me that he paid a surprise visit to my previous apartment, which was not unusual for him, and was perplexed when he realized I no longer lived there. Isaac admitted to cheating on me, which Josh had suspected. You were correct, he made that comment at dinner to warn me. Some things I've realized. Isaac was possessive. He refused to let me hang out with our male friends one-on-one, and he was always hovering next to me. Josh told me that he informed our entire buddy group about Isaac's actions, and while 2 or 3 of them supported Isaac, the rest felt awful for me and cut off communication with Isaac and those 2 guys. Josh informed me that if I needed anything, he'd be there for me, and he apologized again, saying he should have told me sooner when he spotted the indications but never imagined Isaac had been cheating for so long. So sure, I suppose I could do another update if something significant happens, but this is where I am. Relevant comments where the OP has responded, what made Josh suspect cheating? OP, last year I was away for a week with some pals to go camping. He apparently made one of his customary stops to check if Isaac wanted to hang out, but Isaac refused to answer the door. Josh believed he heard a female voice and other noises. Isaac ended up telling him I was on the phone with him, which is false because I had no service during the entire camping trip. When asked to hook up with Josh, the OP said, "I already said this to a reply up there, but Josh is the last person I want to see right now. Frankly, I do not wish to date anyone. I just found out that the man I wanted to marry has been cheating on me throughout our relationship. I'm probably not going back into the dating pool for at least a year, and I prefer a strong emotional connection before sleeping with someone." Josh is a fantastic buddy, but it was difficult to hear his voice over the phone because he was so closely attached to Isaac. My parents cut me off for marrying my husband, but now they want back in my life after hearing about my pregnancy. What should I do? I, 28F, have always had a problematic connection with my parents, particularly when it comes to their expectations for my future. Growing up in a privileged area, I was always compared to my older sister, Amber, 30F. Amber excelled at everything she did, earning straight A's in school and eventually becoming a successful lawyer at a famous New York company. In contrast, I was a more free-spirited individual. I excelled well in school but loved art and literature over science and math, which my parents prized so much. Our family is from old money. My father, Richard, 60M, is a rather affluent individual, whereas my mother, Rose, 58F, comes from a similarly wealthy family and devotes the majority of her time to various charity organizations, more for the social element than true philanthropy, if I'm being honest. They've always been obsessed with preserving our social standing and connections. My parents planned out my entire life from the day I was born. I was meant to attend an Ivy League institution, preferably Harvard, like my father, major in business or law, marry someone from a good family, defined as equally affluent and well-connected, and eventually take over the family firm alongside Amber. But that is not the life I envisioned for myself. I was always more interested in the arts. I enjoyed painting, writing poetry, and visiting the city's museums. My parents saw these pursuits as cute pastimes, but not anything to build a career on. They pushed me into more appropriate extracurricular activities, such as tennis lessons and internships at my father's firm during the summer. I went along with it all to maintain the peace, but I never felt like I genuinely fit into the world they envisioned for me. When I was accepted to Brown University, my parents were disappointed that it wasn't Harvard but believed it was okay. They hoped that surrounding me with the right kind of people would finally put me on the road they had always desired. They had no idea that it would bring me to the person who would forever transform my life. I met Chad, 29M, in my sophomore year of college. We actually bumped into each other at the campus coffee shop. I was racing to get to class and hadn't looked where I was going, while he was leaving with a tray full of coffees for his study group. The accident caused hot coffee to fly everywhere, ruining both of our clothes. Instead of getting furious, Chad laughed and said, "Well, I guess this is one way to break the ice." We ended up skipping our lectures and spending hours conversing. Chad was everything my parents would dislike, which made him the more enticing to me. He hailed from a working-class family in a tiny town in Ohio. His father was a manufacturing worker, and his mother worked as a waitress. Chad was attending Brown on a full scholarship and working part-time to support himself. He was learning to be a teacher and was enthusiastic about education and making a difference in children's lives. From our first meeting, I felt Chad was something unique. He was nice, amusing, and really hardworking. He had a unique ability to make me feel noticed and understood. Chad allowed me to be myself, not the polished, flawless daughter my parents wanted me to be, but the real me, with all my idiosyncrasies and flaws. We began dating, and for the first time in my life, I was actually happy. Chad encouraged my creativity, pushed me to pursue my dreams, and supported me in ways that my family never did. When I informed him about my desire to become a graphic designer, he did not scoff or disregard it as my parents had. Instead, he assisted me in researching programs and internship opportunities. Of course, my parents despised him from the moment they met him. It happened during Parents' Weekend in our junior year. I had been putting off introducing them since I knew it would not go well, but I couldn't do it any longer. The meeting was a fiasco from the beginning. My folks couldn't see beyond Chad's background. To them, he was just a poor youngster attempting to go up the social ladder by dating me. They regularly made disparaging remarks about his attire, which were not designer labels, his modest Midwestern accent, and his profession choice. My mother often asked him whether he was certain he wanted to be just a teacher, when there were so many other respectable careers available. My father scarcely recognized Chad's presence, speaking exclusively to me and expressing his disapproval. They didn't care that Chad treated me better than all of the trust fund boys they tried to put me up with. They were convinced he was only interested in our money and social position. When I tried to defend Chad, citing his scholarship and work ethic, my father scoffed, "Oh honey, don't be naive. Boys like him always have an agenda." Despite my parents' displeasure, Chad and I continued to date throughout college. We encouraged each other throughout late-night study sessions, celebrated our accomplishments together, and discussed our future goals. With Chad, I felt like I could be myself and follow my own path, not the one my parents had planned for me. After graduation, Chad proposed. It wasn't the large lavish occasion that my folks had expected. We were on a weekend camping excursion, which would never appeal to my parents. Sitting by the campfire under a starry sky, Chad turned to me and said, "I know I can't provide you the luxurious life you grew up with, but I pledge to love and support you in all you do. Will you marry me?" I agreed without hesitation. When we returned from our trip and I informed my folks, all hell broke loose. My mother fell into tears, lamenting how I was wasting my life. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red as he raged about how I was making the worst decision of my life. They called me foolish and short-sighted. "Think about your future," my mother implored. "How do you plan to sustain your current lifestyle? How about your children? Don't you want to give them the best of everything?" I attempted to explain that Chad and I had discussed our future, that we had plans, and that we were ready for the challenges that lay ahead, but they wouldn't listen. To them, marrying Chad meant choosing a life of poverty and misery. When I refused to call off the engagement, they offered me an ultimatum. Either end things with Chad or cut me off totally. No more financial assistance, no trust fund, no inheritance, nothing. "If you're so focused on living like a commoner, then you can do it without our money," my dad advised me. I was astounded by their reaction. I knew they wouldn't be pleased, but I didn't expect them to go that far. In that moment, I recognized that their love and support were always conditional. As long as I did what they wanted and fit into their narrow definition of success, I was their daughter. But the moment I took my own route, they were ready to dismiss me. I chose Chad. We married in a short ceremony with only a few close friends present. It wasn't the extravagant social wedding my parents had envisioned for me, but it was beautiful in its simplicity and honesty. Amber did not even show up for the wedding. She agreed with our parents and told me I was making a big mistake. The day after my wedding, I got a cold official letter from my parents' lawyer. It informed me that I had been removed from their will, leaving Amber as the sole heir to their money. It further indicated that I was no longer welcome in the family home and that any future attempts to contact my parents would result in legal action. It stung more than I could have expected, and not because of the money. Chad and I were both employed and doing good. However, it hurt since my own family had prioritized their archaic ideals and social position over my happiness. The parents who reared me, whom I believed loved me unconditionally, had abandoned me because I did not fit into their ideal image. We had no communication for 3 years. I attempted to reconcile several times in the beginning, sending letters and leaving voicemails on holidays and birthdays, but my efforts remained unacknowledged. I eventually quit trying. During those 3 years, Chad and I created a life together. We both worked hard. I was a graphic designer for a small advertising business, and Chad was a high school English teacher. We purchased a little house in a quiet neighborhood, adopted a rescue dog named Max, and were genuinely content. Sure, we didn't have the same privileges as I did growing up. We couldn't afford costly vacations or fashionable clothes, so we had to budget wisely to make ends meet. But we had love and respect for one another, which was more valuable than any money. For the first time in my life, I felt as if I was living truly, pursuing my own aspirations rather than others' expectations. 3 years after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. Chad and I were over the moon. We hadn't been actively trying, but we both wanted children and were eager to begin this new chapter in our lives. We chose to wait until after the first trimester before telling anyone, just to be safe. Amber texted me about a week after we began sharing the news with our friends. It was the first time I had heard from her in 3 years. The message was brief and to the point. Mom and Dad learned about the baby. They want to chat. Call them. I was shocked. How did they find out? I hadn't notified anyone in my family, and as far as I knew, we didn't have any mutual friends who may have shared the news. After discussing it with Chad, I decided to phone them. Perhaps, I thought, the prospect of becoming grandparents had softened their hearts. I called, and my mother answered on the second ring. The talk seemed awkward. My mother performed the majority of the talking, and I could hear my father breathing heavily in the background, occasionally grunting in agreement. She congratulated me on my pregnancy and then, for no apparent reason, began discussing how they wanted to make amends and be present in their grandchild's life. There was no apology for how they treated me, and no acknowledgement of the anguish they had caused. It was as if the previous 3 years of stillness had never occurred. Then my mother mentioned giving us some gifts for the baby. Before I could respond, she rattled off a list of items they wanted to purchase, including a high-end stroller, a custom-made cot, expensive baby outfits, and even a new family car. I was stunned. The goods she described might easily cost more than $10,000. It seemed less like a peace gesture and more like they were attempting to buy their way back into my and my child's lives. My mother became unhappy when I respectfully declined, explaining that Chad and I had already begun preparing for the baby. "Don't be ridiculous," she exclaimed. "You cannot provide for this child in the same manner that we can. We're only trying to help. Don't let your pride stand in the way of providing your baby the finest possible start in life." The conversation concluded with my mother stating that they would send the gifts regardless and that they expected to be active in their grandchild's life. She never asked how I was feeling, how my pregnancy was progressing, or how Chad was doing. It was all about the gifts and what they expected. Chad was upset when I ended the call. When I informed him about the talk, he thought my parents were trying to undermine us by demonstrating that they could provide for our child in ways that we couldn't. "They're trying to buy their way into our lives," he explained, walking around our modest living room. "And once we accept these gifts, they'll use it as leverage to make demands about how we raise our child." I knew Chad had a point, but a part of me hoped it was merely my parents' poor attempt to reconnect. Perhaps if we gave them a chance, they might learn to accept Chad and our life together. "Maybe they've changed," I murmured, but I didn't believe it. Maybe becoming grandparents has made them realize what's truly important. Chad asked me, "Do you really believe that, or are you just hoping it's true because you miss them?" His words struck home. I do miss my family. Despite everything, I miss the good times. Family meals, Christmas parties, and secret jokes that only we knew. But I couldn't forget the terrible times. The relentless pressure, the criticism, the way they dismissed me when I didn't meet their expectations. Chad claims he'll back any decision I make, but I can sense he's not comfortable taking anything from my parents. He is concerned that they will attempt to exercise control over our lives and our child's upbringing. "We've been doing fine on our own," he says. "We don't need their money or their approval." Amber has been blowing up my phone, alternately guilt-tripping me for nursing a grudge and gushing about being an aunt. She does not seem to grasp why I'm hesitant to accept our parents' offer. "They're trying to make things right," she says. Why can't you just let the past go? But it isn't that simple. The past is more than simply the past. It has influenced who I am and the path I've chosen. So Reddit, what should I do now? I desperately need some helpful suggestions on what to do. Update 1. It's been nearly a month since my previous post, and a lot has happened. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for their advice and support. After much debate with Chad, we decided to decline my parents' present offer. It was not an easy decision, but we believed it was the best one for our family. I called my mother and explained that while we appreciated the gesture, we didn't feel comfortable accepting such pricey gifts. I attempted to keep the conversation pleasant and said that if they wanted to be a part of our child's upbringing, we could start with simple steps, such as having dinner together to discuss things. My mother did not take it well. She accused me of being ungrateful and inflexible, and that I was denying my child opportunities out of spite. "You're making a huge mistake," she explained. "You're going to regret this when your child grows up without the advantages we can provide." I stood my ground, however. I emphasized that Chad and I could provide for our child and that all we wanted from them was a connection, not financial possessions. My mother ended the call by hanging up on me. I believed that was the end of it, but I was mistaken. A few days later, a truck arrived at our house, loaded with all of the things my mother had indicated, including the stroller, crib, baby clothes, and even a set of keys to a new car parked on our street. A note was attached, reading, "For our grandchild. We will not allow your stubbornness deny them the best." Chad and I were startled. We had no idea what to do with all this stuff. It felt like a violation of our limits. We opted to store everything in the garage for the time being until we could figure out what to do. Chad wanted to send it all back right away, but I hesitated. The matter became more difficult when Amber showed up at our door the next day. She was ecstatic about the baby and the gifts, as if nothing had ever gone wrong between us. "Isn't it wonderful?" she exclaimed. "Mom and Dad are really pleased to be grandparents. They want to do anything they can to help." I attempted to convey our perspective to her, but she did not appear to grasp. "Why are you being so difficult?" she inquired. "Most individuals would be delighted to receive such wonderful gifts. You're acting as if Mom and Dad are the criminals here." The talk immediately escalated into an argument. Amber accused me of being selfish and clinging onto old grudges. "They're trying to make amends," she insisted. "Why can't you just accept their love and move on?" At that point I lost my temper. "Love?" I asked. "Is that what you call ignoring me for 3 years and then attempting to buy their way back into my life? That is not love, Amber. That is control." Amber stormed out, accusing me of making a tremendous mistake. "You're going to push them away for good this time," she told them, "and it'll be your fault when your child grows up without grandparents." To make matters worse, knowledge of the problem has spread throughout our extended relatives. I've been getting calls and texts from aunts, uncles, and cousins begging me to reunite with my parents. "They're your parents," my Aunt Sharon explained after a particularly difficult phone call. "Obviously, parents want to spoil their grandchild. Why are you fighting this so hard?" I tried to explain how the years of no contact made this feel less like a real attempt at reconciliation and more like a ploy to buy their way back into our life. However, it is difficult to explain to those who have not experienced it firsthand. Chad remained at my side, supporting my actions while also providing a fresh viewpoint when necessary. "We don't need their money," he tells me. "We're doing well on our own. Our child will have everything they need, including love, support, and 2 parents that cherish them." I'm 16 weeks pregnant, and instead of enjoying this precious moment, I'm stressed and conflicted. The gifts are still sitting in our garage, a reminder of the decision we must make. Chad wants to give everything to a local women's shelter, but I am hesitant. When we do that, it feels as if we're closing the door on any chance of reconciliation. Amber keeps sending me photographs of baby outfits and nursery ideas while pretending as if nothing is wrong. My parents have not contacted me directly since the gifts came, but I know they are waiting for a response. The pressure from family members continues, with new calls and messages arriving daily. As my pregnancy grows, I realize we have to make a decision soon. We can't keep those gifts in the garage forever, so we need to start getting ready for the baby's birth. But every time I believe I've made a decision, I start doubting myself. Chad and I have discussed consulting a family counselor to help us manage this scenario. Perhaps an outside perspective will help us find a way ahead. That has not occurred to us yet. For the time being, we are taking each day as it comes. I'm trying to focus on the positive parts of my pregnancy and our relationship, but family turmoil is always present. I just hope whichever decision we make is right for our child. Final update. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'd want to tell the outcome of our predicament. A lot has changed, and I have made some difficult but essential decisions. After weeks of debating what to do, Chad and I decided to consult a family counselor. We had multiple sessions, both together and individually, to discuss our feelings concerning the issue with my parents. The counselor helped us understand our priorities and values, as well as how to set good limits. During this moment, my family put more pressure on me. My parents, seemingly frustrated by our lack of response, began arriving at our house unannounced. They would knock on the door for hours, saying they just wanted to talk. It was quite stressful, particularly as my pregnancy progressed and I dealt with the physical agony that accompanied it. Amber maintained her guilt trip, sending daily texts about how I was pulling the family apart. She even threatened to take me out of her life if I didn't reconcile with our parents, despite the fact that we hadn't spoken for several years. The tipping point occurred when I was around 32 weeks pregnant. My parents arrived at my employment, causing a disturbance in the lobby. They demanded to meet me, claiming they had a right to be part in their grandchild's life. My coworkers were uneasy, and my manager had to beg them to leave or he'd contact the police. That experience reminded me that my parents had not changed at all. They were still attempting to control my life, disregarding my boundaries and preferences. It wasn't about love or reconciliation. It was about achieving what they wanted, no matter the cost. After consulting with Chad and our counselor, we made the difficult decision to maintain no contact with my parents and Amber. We issued an official cease and desist letter through a lawyer, warning that any further attempts to contact us would constitute harassment. We donated all of the baby gifts to a nearby women's shelter, as Chad had advised months before. It was hard to let go of them, yet it felt right. We did not want our child's life to begin with strings attached. The day after we submitted the letter, I blocked my parents and Amber on all platforms. It was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done, but also the most liberating. The continual worry and anxiety I'd been experiencing began to subside almost immediately. Our daughter Susan was born 2 months ago. The birth was tough, and there were times when I wished I had my mother around, but Chad was fantastic throughout the entire process, and we made it through together. These first few weeks of fatherhood have been tough but extremely gratifying. Susan is perfect, and seeing Chad with her makes me fall in love all over again. We may not have all of the luxury gifts my parents wanted for us, but we do have love, which is more than enough. Looking at Susan, I am more certain than ever that we made the correct decision. I want her to grow up in a family full of love and respect, rather than continual judgment and attempts at control. I want her to understand that her worth is not based on money or prestige, but on who she is as a person. Yes, she will not have the materialistic privileges that my parents could have offered, but she will have parents who love her unconditionally and support her aspirations, no matter what they are. She'll grow up knowing that it's acceptable to set boundaries, advocate for herself, and forge her own route in life. This has been a challenging trip, but I do not regret our decision. We're going forward, concentrating on our small family and the promising future ahead of us. Thank you to everyone who has helped us on this journey. Your advice and nice words have meant more than you know. Here's to new beginnings and choosing happiness, even when it's the more difficult way. An old friend who once called me a bad influence for being child-free now wants me to house his family of 5. First and foremost, this is not an article in which I question whether or not I did the correct thing. I am confident that I did. This is a rant about an emotional day, and the only people who will understand are those who do not have children. The gist: Dave, not his real name, a former acquaintance with whom I had lost touch for nearly 3 years, has recently contacted me again. He claims he has a house emergency and has to locate a place for himself, his wife, and their 3 children to stay while their home is being repaired. This is the same person who told me he couldn't be my buddy when I was going through a horrific experience because I'd be a poor influence on his children because I'm childless. A little background. The friendship ended because I was stressed out and upset. My father's death was just one of several awful events that occurred over the course of 3 months. I was looking for comfort, but Dave told me that being childless was a detrimental effect on their family. At the time, he was married with 2 children. In short, they didn't want to spend time with me because I wasn't worth anything compared to their more valuable pals. This was someone I had known since graduate school, and we had spent a lot of time doing enjoyable things together. Like rock climbing. Dave and I were part of a group of common friends who frequently rented out lake cottages or winter lodges for summer and winter sporting activities. We've been pals for over 10 years, and he suddenly deserted me because he decided I wasn't useful. It ached a lot, especially while I was coping with some very tragic situations. Even more so because I was there for him when he learned his mother had cancer and again at her death. As I previously stated, I hadn't spoken or contacted him in nearly 3 years. I attributed it to people being really odd after they have kids, That they slip into a conventional, conservative mindset in which anyone who isn't wanting or working toward a Leave It to Beaver 2.5 kids situation is somehow questionable. Then today, I received a text message from Dave. I never deleted or disabled his phone number, so his name remained saved and there it was. He asked me to allow him and his 3 children to stay at my place since their water heater had broken, and it was an emergency situation. He knows I now live in the same city as him, and it would be a huge help. And here's the kicker. It appears that he and his wife had a 3rd child after telling me I was a terrible influence. Co-baby, I suppose. My main question was, why ask me of all people? I asked Dave why he wanted me to do this for him. His reaction was essentially that he is out of alternatives and no one else has room for him and his 3 children, especially his 5-month-old. I asked him why he couldn't book a hotel room for them. He stated it would be very expensive and that they are in a lot of medical debt because their newest child had to be in the NICU when he was born. I said it sounded challenging, but why me? He said he knew I helped someone with emergency lodging last year and noticed I had plenty of extra space for guests. Because I was so generous then, I could be generous with him now. I knew precisely what he was talking about, but I wanted to know how he knew it. That scenario was touchy, and I assumed it was a private family affair. He claimed it was put on Facebook by the people I assisted. Quick segue. Around this time last year, one of my good college friends, Kate, who has lupus, contracted COVID-19. She was also being very careful. It sucked because this was before immunizations were made available to vulnerable populations. She's my age, in her mid-30s, and aside from lupus, she's in excellent health. In fact, she runs marathons. Kate's lupus exacerbated COVID, and she ended up in the ICU. Furthermore, she was pregnant, and her husband had to choose between saving her life and protecting the fetus. It was basically a choice between providing Kate with life-saving medicine and care at the price of the fetus or having her die. Fortunately, her husband is a decent guy and allowed the doctors to terminate the pregnancy in order to save her life. Kate's mother was a nightmare, claiming her daughter should have perished with the baby. She even attempted to arrange for a priest to perform Kate's funeral rites while she was in a coma. As expected, this resulted in a massive, dramatic fallout. Kate's brother and his wife urgently needed a place to stay away from their mother. I had an extra room and am conveniently located near the hospital. They stayed with me for 2 days before securing a hotel room in one of those long-term residential hotels. Nobody was sure Kate would make it out alive, so they naturally wanted to be nearby. They lived out of state and were living with their cruel mother while their sister was in the hospital. Fortunately, Kate got it out alive and has since disowned her mother. While in a coma, she recalls hearing others discussing the priest's attempted break-in. I welcomed Kate's brother and his wife into my home because they were lovely people, had always been supportive, and are still among the most kind people I know. Apparently, unbeknownst to me because I don't use Facebook, Kate's brother or wife posted something about how nice I was to help them out in a time of need, a ray of sunshine in what had been a very dark era for them. They told me directly, but I had no idea they had published the matter on social media. Let's get back to today. Dave saw those things last year, remembered it, and assumed I would welcome his family and children into my home with open arms. Honestly, I told him to shove it. I was furious that he was attempting to shame me into allowing him and his family into my home for an indeterminate period of time. He knows I don't have children. He even said that my lack of children was a poor influence on his family, but now that it's convenient for him, I'm no longer a bad influence. Now he believes he can waltz back into my life without even apologizing for the horrific things he said 3 years ago. I explained to him that being child-free means I do not want children in my home for a lengthy period of time. If I did, I would not be child-free. I was not going to interrupt my life or my 2 cats only to be a bed and breakfast for his 3 children. He stated I was selfish and should worry about his children, and that there is no hot water in his house. I told him, tough. You can use a credit card or ask a family to pay for a hotel stay. He made additional excuses, bringing up their medical debt again, and assured me that it would just be for a few days. I informed him that many days for a damaged hot water heater seems exceedingly suspicious. Things like these can be corrected rather fast. I am aware of our state's residency regulations, and if someone stays in someone's home for 7 days, they are entitled to tenant rights. I wasn't going to risk this becoming a situation in which I couldn't get rid of them. He told me off and threatened to spread the word on social media that I wouldn't help a family of 3 in an emergency and that I wanted innocent kids to suffer. I instructed him to pound sand and eat a dick. He hasn't been a friend for many years. He doesn't even know my address. All he knows is that I live nearby in the same city and that I'm alone. He can slam me on social media all he wants. I'm not on Facebook, Therefore, I don't care what a group of Karens thinks of me. I told him that social media is not real life. If he tells my actual friends about this, they will laugh in his face. I have all of his texts as proof of how he spoke to me, and I told him he used to be a kind person. We spent a lot of good times together, and I'm still terrible about his mother. I'm sorry he chose this road in life since it sounds like he's miserable, but he's a negative influence in my life, therefore I can't have him around. I'm confident he'll understand because he said the same about me. That was the gist of my last words to him. He took off till I blocked him. I'm very sad about it. He used to be a good person 10 years ago and his mother was a gorgeous woman. I'm now bracing myself for any flying monkeys who may emerge from the woodwork and try to shame me into taking care of his family. I can't wait to tell them to take his family with them. I've already discussed the problem with my two best buddies. They were both astonished by Dave's bravado and lack of shame. They believed it was suspicious because he was so insistent on getting into my home for days. One acquaintance reported that her water heater broke recently, and she had a plumber come out the same day. It only took a day to fix. His opposition to the hotel plan raised a red flag for them, and they're curious about the whole situation. I agreed that there is a sense of absence. I feel righteous about all of this. I know I did the right thing. I resent that a past act of compassion was turned against me. Years ago I felt he had a point, that I was somehow unworthy because I was depressed, and people dislike sad people. But now that I see things clearly, I see that he had a deeply flawed personality. It did bring back old melancholy memories. Anyway, thanks for reading if you got all the way through. I needed to get this off my chest and rant. Update on Dave's water heater. An old friend, who once described me as a negative influence on his family, now wants me to house his family. Well, I'm pleased, and a bit shocked, that most issues have been rectified barely over 24 hours after they began. I suppose this is one of the benefits of having people working for you behind the scenes. I also wanted to thank everyone who interacted with my last post. I appreciate the encouragement and knew you'd understand my outburst. RIP to my inbox, but I read everything. And you all are the best Reddit community. No trolls, which I believe is a Reddit miracle. So on to the update. I'm writing this while drinking hot tea and I encourage you to do the same. This is going to be long. The deal. All of your gut instincts were correct. It was suspected that a damaged water heater would force a family of 5 to seek an alternative home, especially because Dave does not even have a water heater. It was all a lie. All of you go, I knew it. So here's the deal. Dave sold his house 6 months ago, and he and his wife Shelley have been looking for a larger home ever since. As I am writing this, they are already in a motel with their children. They have a lot of hot water. I imagine you all bobbing your heads up and down, saying, yep, I knew it. You requested an update because the water heater excuse sounded strange, so here it is. Seriously, grab yourself some tea. My sister, who is in another time zone and has a few hours on me, appears to be looking into Dave. Her spouse worked as a PI throughout graduate school, and she has a professional talent to find information about people. She's a little spooky but in a good way. She also uses social media, but I do not. I gave her Dave's complete name and some information I knew about him, such as his prior residence, his wife's name, and the names of his children. She went into town. She told me that his house went on the market around 6 months ago and sold swiftly for significantly more than it was purchased for years ago. It's a seller's market, and this was a big sale. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Then she stated she checked around the city and adjacent towns and couldn't locate any records of him purchasing further land. It appeared that his house had sold, but nothing further occurred. So I texted my 2 friends from yesterday, telling them what my sister discovered and that it appears Dave sold his house and no longer has a water heater problem, because he doesn't have one. My friends were asking, WTF? Allison, one of the 2 pals, contacted my sister, and the 2 embarked on a social media journey. My sister was scared I was being duped. Allison was a graduate school classmate of mine and Dave over a decade ago. She wasn't particularly close to him, and he wasn't on her radar, but she was one of his Facebook friends. We learned more after people friended absolutely everyone they knew on Facebook. Around the same time, I heard from Kate's brother and sister-in-law, who had remained with me while she was in the hospital. Kate's sister-in-law, Laura, expressed gratitude for my donation on Facebook. She confirmed that she had posted 2 pictures, one of my cat, who appeared to be laying down the home rules, and one of my large Monster Deliciosa plant, which she adored. You may extract information about my home from the images, such as the clean and spacious kitchen and the great pantry, which will be useful later. Laura was humiliated when I told her what was going on, and she realized she might have been somewhat to blame for Dave wanting to get into my house. She deleted the post, untagged my name and provided me with a screenshot to prove it. She even asked if she could assist with anything else. I told her that my sister was obviously doing a deep dive and could use some assistance. I put Laura in touch with my sister. Laura then allegedly contacted Allison at random, and late in the morning, Allison requested screenshots of the specific parts in the text discussion where Dave stated that his problem was with the water heater and that he wanted me to care for his family and children for a few days. I gave it to her, and there was radio silence for the majority of the day. I mused, I wonder what's going on. In the early evening, I learned a lot more about the story. My sister, Allison, and Laura sent me texts. I'm going to try to lay it out, even if it's a little circuitous. Dave and his wife Shelley sold their home 6 months ago. They want additional space and bedrooms for their now 3 children and wanted to upgrade. Because it was a tremendous and volatile seller's market, their home was projected to have gained high 6 figures in equity since they purchased it. They were thrilled to put it on the market. Dave and Shelley wanted to earn top cash for the house, so they sold it without a condition that they must purchase a home before the new buyer could move in and legally take possession. Dave was certain that with the large sale, they could acquire another one shortly. Their home sold quickly, and there was a bidding war. Dave bragged about it. He and Shelley tried to buy another home, but it was not easy. They were outbid on all of the residences for which they bid. When the new owners took over the house, they had to move out. Dave and Shelley didn't think this was a big deal. A friend took them in with the understanding that it would be temporary and that they would be actively looking for a home. They tried, but were still outbid. They refused to reduce their expectations or change their budget. They wouldn't look at properties the same size as their previous one because the whole point of selling was to buy a larger home. They couldn't win any of the bidding wars, and Dave refused to raise the budget. Their third child was born prematurely and was in the NICU, so they do have medical debt. Dave did not want to spend any more money or take out new debts. So Dave, Shelley, and the 3 children went to someone else's house to stay. They kept looking for homes but couldn't find one. This happened again, this time at a third person's house. At this point, people began encouraging him that it could be a good idea to wait out the housing bubble until it was no longer a seller's market and then get an apartment in the interim. Dave batted this down since he said that an apartment costs the same as a mortgage. If he's going to pay for living expenses each month, it better be a mortgage. He considered paying for an apartment to be a financial drain. Shelley became further enraged at the suggestion. She didn't want to live in an apartment that was smaller than their prior home. Dave's family appeared to be overstaying their welcome. People were growing annoyed, and Dave and Shelley refused to chip in for groceries. Dave's family had now reached the 4th residence of folks offering to take them in. A month ago, they ran out of free housing alternatives. Hilariously, they were all sold out because people required the space for their own families visiting for the holidays. Nobody wants to take the freeloaders in anymore. Shelley is a city school teacher, and with the kids back in school, they felt compelled to remain in the city. Their only other possibilities for free accommodation were Dave's brother, who lives approximately 2 hours away, and Shelley's parents, who reside 6 hours away. Neither choice was ideal for Dave and Shelley's careers or for their children's access to in-person programs. Dave and his family needed to find housing right away, so they booked a motel. They were really upset because their children are loud, and the hotel personnel are constantly ordering them to be quieter. Dave and Shelley grumbled about how much they dislike living in hotels and how unfair it is that they can't afford a house despite having so much money. To be clear, they have more than enough money to get by living in a hotel, which is still significantly more expensive than renting an apartment. Dave likes the notion of the hotel because there is no need to sign a lease. They can go at any moment, and they have maid service. Shelley gets all poor me, saying that the kids are sad because they don't have a backyard to play in, and that staying in a hotel prevents them from being kids. Slight segue. Allison went back through Shelley's posts and discovered an incident in which Shelley and a group of her pals were not very polite about me. This occurred at the beginning of the pandemic. It was back when everyone was panicking out and buying up all the toilet paper. People also purchased a large quantity of food before it could be refilled due to panic buying. In the early evening, I learned a lot more about the story. My sister, Allison, and Laura sent me texts. I'll try to explain it, even if it's a little circuitous. Dave and his wife Shelley sold their home 6 months ago. They want additional space and bedrooms for their now 3 children and wanted to upgrade. It was a hot seller's market, and their home was projected to have gained high 6 figures in equity since they purchased it. They were thrilled to put it on the market. Dave and Shelley wanted to achieve the highest possible price for their home, so they sold it without first purchasing a new one. Dave was confident that with the big sale, They could obtain another one fast. Their home sold quickly, and there was a bidding war. Dave bragged about it. He and Shelley attempted to purchase another property, but it was a difficult process. Every home they bid on was won by someone else who bid higher. Dave and Shelley had to leave their old house when the new owners moved in. They didn't believe it was such a huge thing at first. A friend took them in, assuming it would be temporary and that they would be actively looking for a home. They tried but were still outbid. They refused to reduce their expectations or change their budget. They would not consider homes that were the same size as their previous one because the whole point of selling was to move into a larger home. They could not win any bidding wars, and Dave refused to raise the budget. To make matters worse, their third child was delivered prematurely and required care in the NICU, resulting in medical debt. Dave did not want to spend more money or take out more debts. So Dave, Shelley, and the 3 children went to stay at someone else's house. They continued to look for a home but were unsuccessful. This pattern repeated when they went to a third person's house. People began encouraging Dave that it could be a good idea to wait out the housing bubble, when it was less of a seller's market, and get an apartment in the meanwhile. Dave rejected this since he claimed that renting an apartment costs as much as a mortgage. He figured that if he was going to pay for living expenses on a monthly basis, it should be for a mortgage. He viewed renting a flat as a financial drain. Shelley became further enraged at the suggestion. She did not want to live in an apartment that was smaller than their previous home. Dave's family had overstayed their welcome. People were growing annoyed, and Dave and Shelley refused to chip in for groceries. Dave's family was now in their 4th place to stay. A month ago, they ran out of free housing alternatives. Ironically, they were asked to leave because folks needed to make room for their own relatives visiting for the holidays. Nobody wants to take in freeloaders anymore. Shelley is a school teacher in the city, and now that their children are back in school, they need to stay in the city. However, their only other possibilities for free accommodation were Dave's brother, who lives 2 hours away, and Shelley's parents, who reside 6 hours away. Neither choice was ideal for Dave and Shelley's careers, nor for bringing their children to in-person lessons. So Dave and his family booked a hotel. They were very upset because their children were being loud, and the hotel personnel kept ordering them to be quieter. Dave and Shelley talked about how much they disliked living in a hotel and how unfair it was that they couldn't afford a house despite having so much money. To be clear, they have enough money to stay in a hotel, but it is still significantly more expensive than renting an apartment. Dave loved the hotel idea because they didn't have to sign a lease, could leave at any moment, and had maid service. Shelley began playing the victim, claiming that the kids were sad because they didn't have a backyard to play in and that staying in a hotel prevented them from being children. Meanwhile, Allison went back and uncovered posts from Shelley in which she and a group of pals were talking negatively about me. This occurred at the beginning of the pandemic, when people panicked and purchased items such as toilet paper and food. Someone I knew from graduate school contacted me to see how I was doing. I assumed she was approaching me to offer support and be kind, but her true intention was to ask for part of my food. I've always kept a well-stocked pantry, a tradition passed down from my grandmother, who survived World War II. This acquaintance knew I had a good supply of food and requested me to give her some because I didn't have any children to feed. She stated her child was a picky eater and that I probably have some frozen chicken on hand. I was astonished by her audacity and told her that if she needed food, she could go to a food bank. I was not going to simply hand her my lunch since her child only ate homemade chicken nuggets. There was no food scarcity, it was simply panic shopping. I suggested that she go to the grocery store early in the morning, when they usually refill, and she'd be able to obtain chicken. She labeled me selfish and brought it to social media, where she conversed behind my back with other spouses of graduate school colleagues. Back to Shelley, she sided with the woman who had tried to persuade me to give her my frozen chicken. Shelley also thought I was selfish for not assisting a mother out. She even commented that it was weird for me to keep so much food around while I lived alone, implying that I definitely had difficulties. If you guessed Dave's bad influence comment about me was planted by his wife, you'd be correct. When Laura posted about my generosity in allowing her and her husband to stay at my house for a few days while Kate was in the hospital, Shelley originally commented sweetly, stating how nice it was of me to do so and how lovely my home looked. But behind the scenes she wasn't as nice. Shelley's recent tweets moan about how sad her children are because they don't have a backyard to play in, and how staying in a hotel prevents them from being kids. Then, just 2 days ago, she tweeted about finding a new home for her family that was so cute and had a fantastic kitchen. Dave texted me unexpectedly after 3 years of no communication, claiming he had a damaged water heater and asking me to host his family for a few days. You all know I told him no. My pals noticed that Dave and Shelley made passive-aggressive comments on social media this morning about how bad society is nowadays when friends refuse to aid families in need. Shelley grumbled that their new home had fallen through and received a lot of sympathy from her Karen pals. She claimed her children were quite disappointed. I believe this is when Allison requested screenshots of Dave's water heater sob tale. Allison went on a tear, uploading the screenshots and revealing that Dave and Shelley never had a new home scenario planned. They were simply trying to influence me by lying. Regarding a damaged water heater, I had never agreed to having them stay in my home. Laura confronted them for attempting to take advantage of me. Allison went on a rage over the situation that occurred 3 years ago. My true friends, like Allison, were very supportive, whereas Dave was indifferent, saying, "Yeah, I don't care," and branding me a bad influence on his family. Allison informed everyone about Dave labeling me a terrible influence because of my child-free lifestyle, and how stupid it was for him to believe he could simply stroll back into someone's life after criticizing them. Allison, who is childless, found it particularly offensive. People began chastising Dave for being so nasty before requesting favors. People began calling him cheap and a leech, and the situation appeared to escalate. Some of the folks who had let his family stay with them for the previous 6 months came out of the woodwork to criticize him. One guest mentioned how filthy Dave's family was and how much extra cleaning they had to perform. They claimed his children had no manners, frightened their dogs, and that it was a relief when they eventually departed. People were outraged that Dave and Shelley had sought to deceive me and then portray me as the bad guy on social media. People I hadn't spoken with in a long time came out to defend me, telling Dave I was a decent person and reminded him of how I had helped them in graduate school. It was quite good to hear. Some even commented that I had helped them acquire jobs, which was more than Dave had ever done. I'm quite involved in the graduate school networking scene, and I appreciate sharing career prospects and mentoring others, especially those looking for scientific jobs. Even Dave's own brother expressed displeasure at Dave's behavior. He remembered how much I had helped them when their mother died and stated that if she knew how Dave treated others, she would be rolling in her grave. My sister ended up getting me on Zoom with her and screen sharing her display to show me what all the fuss was about. Perhaps this is why I never received mail accusing me of not allowing a family into my home. I expected some blowback, but I never received it. Oh God, schadenfreude. Dave had threatened to put me on blast on Facebook, but he ended up getting blasted himself. How ridiculous, how utterly idiotic. I have text messages from him lying about the goddamned water heater. He must have assumed that because I was not on social media, I would be unable to inform others that he was lying or that I would be unaware that he was truly enjoying hot water at his hotel. I feel like I escaped a nuclear-tipped rocket. After work, I had to pour myself a drink and ponder about it all. After examining everything, I believe Dave and Shelley intended to try to squat in my house. Dave went off when I cited the 7-day rule, which allows tenants to gain rights in our state. I felt something was fishy, and you all did too. I believe Dave was a cheap bastard who didn't want to pay extra for a hotel, didn't want to rent an apartment, and had exhausted all of his in-city free lodging options with pals. It was their last desperate attempt. Shelley knew I was welcoming to visitors, and they both knew my home was clean and well stocked with food for their children. They already had a reputation for eating people out of their homes. If they had stayed with me for a week, they would have been tenants, and I would have had to go through the legal process to evict them. It may have taken several months. It is much easier to con a single person and force them out of their own home than to try the same trick on friends with children and limited space. He was simply seeking for free housing so he could invest every dime he had towards his goal of purchasing a 4+ bedroom house with the proceeds from the sale of his previous home. I don't know for sure, but it makes sense. So I decided to send him one final SMS. I unblocked him and sent this message before reblocking his number. Hey Dave, I found out you were lying about the water heater. You don't even have one. You're staying in a hotel while sitting on a large sum of money from selling your old property. I think it's incredibly shady of you to lie to me and try to get into my home to leech off of me, especially since you wrecked our friendship by calling me a terrible influence on your family. I didn't tell you back then, but I'll tell you now, you are trash. Your mother would be embarrassed of you. I see it as all projection since you are a negative influence on not only my life but also the lives of others. If you truly believed that I was a terrible influence, you would not have attempted to bring your family into my home this week. But if you still think I'm a terrible influence, you won't have to worry about me aiding you or doing you any favors in the future. I will keep my evil influence away from your family. Oh, and Shelley appears to have become a genuine treat. Because I am not a monster, the final thing I will do for you is remind you that you must fulfill your responsibilities as a husband and father by providing a secure dwelling for your family. Stop playing those freeloader games. Here is a link to our local Craigslist housing page. I am confident you will find something. Oh, and I hope to see you at our next non-Zoom alumni event. I'm sure it will be wonderful to catch up in person. So it's finished. I said my piece. Once again, you were all correct. Something else was going on. I'm really sick right now. How could someone conceive of doing this to me? I'm also feeling ill at the thought of admitting them into my house. That would have been a nightmare. I suspect that my pregnant wife may have had an affair with her coworker. Am I the asshole for asking for a paternity test now? Original post May 9, 2024. My wife, 38F, and I, 39M, have been together for 12 years. I don't know how to describe it other than calling it the perfect relationship. I think in 12 years we've only ever gotten to the point of really raising our voices at one another maybe 2 or 3 times. We do everything together, but always have never had issues allowing each other to lead our own lives and follow our own interests. We bought a house where we wanted. We both have good high-paying jobs that have great work-life balance. Basically it's been everything short of perfect. We've been trying for 2 years to get pregnant and it hasn't been happening. We were just about to start the fertility stuff when I came home from a work trip and guess what, she's pregnant. I had this weird instant thought of, wait, I thought we didn't try during the week last month because of the fertility testing, but I couldn't remember exactly because to be honest, we were busy at it. So I just assumed I missed remembering. Now, I travel around the country pretty regularly for work. Other than COVID, I've been on the road as much as 40 weeks a year sometimes. Since COVID it's been less but still more than a week a month. Over the last 4-5 years my wife has gotten very friendly with a guy she works with, let's call him Matt. Matt is slightly younger, I think 34M or so. I know him, he's married, I know his wife. They've worked together for I think 7 years or so. He's always been around, he and I've been friendly. Have I ever thought something was happening? No, but I've always thought. You'd be a fool to not think there's even a 1% chance your spouse would go outside the relationship. Maybe I'm naive, but I've always seen it as a safeguard to not take my wife or any other partner in the past for granted. She's never given me a reason to think she'd do that. But anything is possible. So about a month ago I'm out of state for work and she's at home. I ask her what she's doing earlier in the day and she says Matt is coming by for dinner. Not out of the ordinary, Matt comes by from time to time. Sometimes with his wife, sometimes without, sometimes when I'm not there. I don't think much of it. We have a security system which includes cameras both inside and outside of the house which we installed after an unrelated incident a few years ago. They record and are live accessible by both her and I. I often use those cameras to check on the dog when I or both of us are away, as the rest of the system is monitored by a company in case of an alarm going off. She knows I check those cameras. There's a system installed where I can talk through them. I'll mess with my wife and she will be with me if either of us are out of town. She travels for work as well, but far less than I do. Point is, it's known that I check them often when I'm not at home. So I turn on the camera and I see my 4 months pregnant wife, lying on the floor, on her side with Matt sitting, straddling her legs and using a foam roller to massage her hips. So I'm like, okay, what the fuck is this? I start rewinding through the footage and they are eating and talking normally, but then they get on the couch and get under the same blanket. Now, they are feet to feet, but that couch isn't that big. Then they move to the floor and that's when I logged in. Anyway, I text her, I'm still watching the cameras, they both look like deer in headlights and he very quickly leaves. We get into an argument. She isn't mad at me accusing her but she's adamant that nothing has or ever would happen, and that what I saw was innocent and she was complaining about being in pain from the pregnancy. Which I know is true, she's already having some issues with back pain, etc. The biggest point of that discussion was I asked, if I were there would you two have been comfortable doing any of that in front of me? And she reluctantly admitted, no, probably not. I told her I didn't want to talk after that and we'd talk when I got home 3 days later. That's when it hit me. What if my weird gut moment feeling about her telling me she was finally pregnant was this? What if my 1% happened and this is not my child we are having? Now, it eats away at me while I'm at a hotel alone 1,000 miles away for 3 days. I reconcile with myself that, I think it's less likely than more likely that something between them has happened. But basically my 1% just jumped to 10%, 20% maybe. I get home and she's on eggshells and doesn't mention it. I kinda wait to see what she's going to do. 2 days later, she finally brings it up and breaks down. Swears nothing has happened. She would never. Doesn't do anything over the top to try and prove anything. Which I took as a good sign. But anyway, we talk out the issue and everything to a point of at least moving forward for now. I'm still coping and dealing with it, figuring out how to retrust after all this time. I'm getting more and more understanding of the fact that they are friends. They've been friends for so long, Maybe he has intentions. But I don't see her having any, and I've never really picked up on it, and I've spent time around both of them together many times, and never caught anything. So the thing that is destroying me right now is, if I'm wrong and something did happen, while I can figure out how to deal with that, what if that child isn't mine? In the argument and a few long conversations we've had about the situation since, I've never brought that up, and she's not mentioned it. Mostly because I don't want to make the situation worse and crush her if in fact she's telling the truth, which I mostly believe. The only thing I can think to do at this point is to wait until the baby is born and immediately order a paternity test in secret. Should I do that? Should I tell her and have it dealt with now? If you're a woman in her shoes and you're telling the truth, would that destroy you, or your view of me? If you're lying, what would you do if I asked? I don't want to ask a super vague question, but what should I do? TLDR, very small chance my wife of 12 years had an affair and she's 4 months pregnant, and I can't bring myself to ask for a paternity test for fear of crushing her if nothing actually happened. But I am planning on doing it in secret when the baby comes. What should I do? Update. So many comments. Thank you everyone, more than I can address directly, but I'm going to keep reading a few things. 1. Stop DMing me about this, thanks. 2. Some have made some good points about addressing it now rather than later, and that's something that I'm considering more than I was before. Thank you. 3. To those focused only on my relationship. I get it, but that's not what I'm focused on. We've been talking about it a lot. My wife and I are pretty open people with each other. I'm not saying I'm convinced nothing happened, but I'm more focused on paternity right now. 4. If I need to track, spy on, life 360, my wife, then this relationship is over already. That's not the relationship we have, and not one that I ever want, and in my opinion not one anyone should ever have. We are working on rebuilding trust. As I said in this long-winded post, my default of 1% possibility went up to 10% or so. Trust me, I'm taking my relationship seriously, but to those I've said this to already. If the kid isn't mine, then there's no longer any conversation to have. 5. I've already had this discussion with my lawyer. I don't live in a state where the birth certificate stuff will be an issue. If I have paperwork that this child isn't mine, then divorce isn't going to be much of an issue. Both of us are in an independent financial situation where it won't matter much regardless. I'll keep up with this post as long as I can and post an update when and if anything gets resolved. Update May 10, 2024. So she was out of state on a business trip until late last night. It's Friday, so she worked from home in our kitchen. So I asked to talk and brought it up and asked for a test. She immediately said yes and said there's zero doubt and nothing that she'd even have a second to worry about. But she has no problem doing it now. The only caveat I left it with is, if it's invasive at all per our doctors, then I'm okay waiting until it's low risk. I'm not a doctor, no clue what they'd have to do it now. So not sure when we are. But she's aware and we are getting one. It was a decent and longer conversation. We are currently sitting together getting lunch. She's got no clue I did this on Reddit. Hence the new account, because she is on here somewhere. Thank you everyone for your help and opinions. A bunch of you made me realize that we're already really open about everything, and if nothing happened then she wouldn't worry about getting one. I was more worried about her health and adding some insane level of stress if it was an issue, as she's an at-risk pregnancy and it took so long for us to get pregnant. So again, thank you all for the help. I suppose I can update if it's mine or not, but I'm not sure how long that will be. I'm 90 to 95% sure it is mine. But this will help us continue this conversation. Thank you. Update. Just because it seems to be more of a topic on this post versus the other one for some reason. Yes, I have the footage. No, I haven't talked to Matt yet. He's told her he wants to talk about it, but I've told them to wait on that. My relationship with my wife and paternity is what's important right now. I will eventually talk with Matt. No, I'm not going to get Matt's wife involved intentionally. I don't know why I would want to just be vindictive. I'm not going to cover for him obviously, but his relationship is his. And mine is mine. I'm not interested in making this worse. Whatever is going on between him and his wife isn't any of my business. Relevant comments. Upu, when asked why his wife thought she could be intimate with someone else. We've talked about it at length, nothing is being ignored. I could write you an essay about our past, her reasons and my feelings on it. But instead I'll just say, I'm aware of it. She's claiming innocence of anything further, but at the same time admitting that it wasn't a good look, but she wasn't thinking about it at the time. And that's what we are currently working through. When told it doesn't look innocent and asked if his wife goes to Matt's house when his wife isn't home, she's 4 months old. I was home. And we had been on the clock. To the point of the days blending together, trust me. We are pretty open people and pretty comfortable with ourselves and each other. I don't know if she's been to his house without his wife. I mean, the 3 and 4 of us all hang out probably once or twice a month, but they work directly together every day and have for years. So obviously there's a closeness there. They are both upper management in their company, and at my company I have long-term friends that are women. I've traveled with them. We've done dinner and hung out in hotel rooms together. But I've never done anything because that's not me. I'm married and love my wife and my life. I have no reason to. So I mean, the optics are bad. I just have to decide if it's only the optics. Or if she has a reason to. Maybe he has a reason too, and that's what I saw. That I'm not sure about. But that comes down to, do I trust her to handle that? She says if that's the case she's never noticed it. And she hangs out with him and his wife just about as much as he hangs out with us. She works in a building right near them. My company is based out of Chicago and I live on one of the coasts. So my coworker friends are much more spread out. We can't go to the bar to grab after-work drinks any day like they can. Honestly, I usually go to their work hangouts more than mine because of that. I'm friendly with her CEO because of it. So is it perfect? No. But I've always trusted her. I've never had a reason not to. In 15 years, this is the first crack or dent in it. OOP gives a clearer description of what happened that day. That's not what I saw. She said something. He froze. Said something I couldn't hear and she said no, don't worry about it. He put something in the dishwasher and she walked him out to the front door. He didn't dive out the window. You have to remember this is Reddit. I'm not putting every single nuanced detail in this because that would take me hours to write, and I'm not putting my security footage on the internet for strangers to see. The reason I have the security system in the first place is because of a stranger on the internet. I'm not saying anything beyond that didn't happen for sure between them. I'm saying I don't know now and I don't have any proof. That's what my wife and I are discussing just about every day and what we are working through. The original point of the post was, the only thing we hadn't talked about was paternity because I don't want to put her in a situation where she medically loses the child. Mine or not. Not only have I not been able to put every single nuanced thing in this, I've also sprinkled in false details about our lives, nothing pertinent to what happened but other mundane details. I was a very small public figure at one point, and some lowlife from the internet traveled across the country to make death threats against us because of something warped in his head. To the point where the federal government had to get involved. People here are wildly jumping at conclusions with much less information than I have and ignoring the original point of the post and the original questions asked. Has he told Matt's wife she is my wife's friend's wife? We don't meet up and knit together. I know her through my wife. I see her maybe once every few months at a bar after work, or if they come by for dinner or to hang out. We aren't besties. Again, what should I tell her? Hey, your husband was at my house. I knew he was there and I saw him run a foam roller over the outside of my wife's hip while he was sitting on her feet. It's super obvious they are fucking, and even though I'm not sure, it's possible she's carrying his baby. This isn't a soap opera. There's nothing I know that I can tell her, so why would she take my word on what tiny evidence there is? And why or how in the world would that help my situation? If all of this is false now, I've destroyed my relationship by acting like a child trying to drum up drama for what obviously looks like being vindictive, and I put them in the same situation we are in now. For something that I don't know is true yet. I believe you have entirely lost the plot here. Update 2 August 21st, 2024. Hi folks. So I haven't been touching this account at all as I was mostly bombarded by people telling me I'm an AI, wishing my wife a miscarriage, claiming she's going to get a secret abortion to save herself. Or that I'm a clown for not keeping it real, and destroying someone else's marriage over speculation only. I'm amazed that people are still following this and invested in it after all this time. Here's where we are at. Yes, my wife is still very much pregnant. She's hard to pick things up off the floor stage. She's due in 8 weeks. Holy shit, 6 weeks actually. Just looked at the calendar. We are getting weekly ultrasounds at this point. He's already about 5 pounds and has a big ol' head. She and I had some very long direct conversations about everything. She is adamant that nothing has ever happened and nothing ever would. For a while she was pretty upset with herself for causing this and causing my feelings of doubt. I've done my best to remedy that as I've got to keep stress off her as much as possible right now. But it will for sure be revisited after the birth. As I've been saying the entire time, I'm really only worried about the child and the birth going well, etc. Well, mostly, maybe not only. The only thing we still really disagree on is I thought he was getting too close because he had developed feelings or was getting attention that he wasn't getting elsewhere, maybe etc. She doesn't see it that way but has also said it's possible, but if so she was blind to it. I told her I wanted a paternity test and she immediately agreed to it and said no problem at all. My only stipulation was that it couldn't be medically risky or stress-inducing at all as she's a high-risk pregnancy. We both spoke to her doctors about it and they basically told us that our only option was to go to the courthouse because they wouldn't do one without the law involved. Which we both thought was ridiculous. Her doctor was a bit thrown off by it, so I didn't press very hard. It was honestly her pretty much demanding it. I knew there were other options. I looked into those other options and ultimately decided to wait until the birth, and I have a lab already set up to do it, ready to go. I'm 95% sure it's unnecessary, but I'm still getting one for my peace of mind and mostly so that nothing will come between me and my child. For those of you that have left me messages of support that I didn't get back to, thank you. I'm going to spend some time going through them tonight before I run off again. For those of you who've left messages that think I should be acting like a 17-year-old high school student and either getting violent, purposely cheating on my wife to prove a point, or other childish trash. Thanks for the entertainment at least. Stop watching TLC and TikTok. That dumbass drama ain't the way, kiddos. And to the one person who suggested I cause an accident with my wife, I hope you end up behind bars someday. It's really likely I'm not going to come back here after tonight until after I get the results from the lab. So if you're really still interested in the results, come back in 1.5-2 months. I've been told the results take about 48 hours once submitted. I'll give you your Maury moment then. OOP answers questions in a comment. Here, just as a preempt, I'm going to post something I responded to someone else on the last post just a minute ago, but I likely won't check this account until after the birth after this. Comment 1. People seem to be reading into the reasons I thought all this was more than what I said. I've seen dude, they were in bed together. You caught them. Or, they were cuddling under a blanket. Totally get how the telephone game works. But I never said any of that. So I'll clarify, I guess. Here's exactly what I saw. They were on the sectional couch in my living room at either end under the same large blanket, feet to feet. The massage. She was lying on the floor on her side. He was sitting by her feet and rolling one of those big foam rollers on her back and side, which is something I do all the time because she's been complaining about back and outer hip pain. Still enough for me to raise a concern with her. But people seem to be reading into that as they were basically dry humping and thought you couldn't see. Comment 2. I'm being told that I'm being oblivious and ignoring the obvious, and letting her and him off the hook. This is a direct comment I left someone giving my thoughts on that. I think they said something like, this is what guys who choose to have their head in the sand say. My response. Yeah, I'm pretty well aware of that. I've also stated many times that my wife is a high-risk pregnancy, so I've decided to try and not explode things until I know something for a fact and risk what would potentially be the only opportunity I have to have a child at my age. If it turns out I'm wrong and that happens because I blew all this up over nothing, I don't know how I could live with myself. And my marriage likely wouldn't survive that anyway. So, I don't see that as a winning option. If I deal with it calmly and like an adult, and if I'm wrong, then great, we can move on. And if I'm right, then it can still be dealt with accordingly with facts and not speculation. If the child is mine, and the birth goes well, then we have a healthy child and I can deal with the remainder of any damage she has or hasn't done without risking potentially the only child I'm going to have. Trust me. I'm not ignoring it, I'm choosing to support my wife to get through the pregnancy first. Then I'll deal with the rest of it. It's probably been the hardest thing I've ever done emotionally. But here we are. End of copied comment. I know I'm a sarcastic SOB in some of these comments, but honestly thank you for everyone's concern, and I have gotten some good advice from people. Mostly this has been a bit cathartic to write all this down, as most of my friends are toxic dudes who are more interested in fighting about golf or some other pointless shit. Love me. But I don't really have anyone other than her to talk to about any of this. So honestly, thank you. New updates. OOP added an update on the previous post. Quick update. Today is 9/14. We just got an induction date scheduled on the 26th. Update. 9/29, 1 a.m. Baby boy is here, born 9/27, 7 pounds 10 ounces. He had what the doctors in the OR said was the biggest meconium they've seen in a while on the table, so it was likely he was about 8 pounds when he was born. Labor was induced early morning on the 26th. Labor was like 30 hours. Pushed for like 3 HRS. No progress, ended up in a C-section. He's perfectly healthy and kind of a tank. I was almost a 10 pounds baby. Mom is dealing with recovery and not having a fun time, but we are getting there. We are being discharged on Tuesday, they tell us. We live about 2 miles from the hospital. So I've been going back to the house to shower and sneak in like an hour or two a couple times. Otherwise I've been here the entire time. As far as paternity, just out of all that entails with the birth of a newborn and recovery and honestly a bit of embarrassment. We haven't started the test, but it's set up and ready to start on Tuesday when we get out of here. So I'll give a final update after the results come back. So maybe another week to 10 days. My honest opinion after looking at this kid is, he is mine. Matt and I are physically very opposite. Different heritages. I'm 6'3", 240 pounds, he's probably 5'8", 175 to 180 pounds. I've always held the belief that babies all generically look the same other than obvious ancestral differences. But yes, this moose of a baby has some obvious traits that would only come from me. Still doing the test, but I'm very much not worried about it. I'll make a new post when I get the results back. Final update results are in October 10th, 2024 TLDR, child is mine. The baby is as healthy as could be so far. Mom on the other hand has been having issues. Baby was born on 9/27. Labor was 30 hours, ending in a C-section. 7 pounds 10 ounces. Mom didn't do so well. We were supposed to be in for 4 days and ended up being 8 days. Mom has been back to the hospital twice since. I'm currently sitting in the car with the little guy because Mom's in the emergency room right now. She is making progress but still having a hard time with a few things. As I mentioned before, she has some pre-existing issues that we knew would make this hard. But there have been a few hurdles, but we are getting over them together. As far as paternity, the results came back this morning. Greater than 99.9999 match that I am the father. I did pretty much already know this, but now there is no question and I can put it behind me. My wife and I have had long conversations about all this leading up to the birth, especially around the time of the original post when all this started. We're in a good place, and while it's always going to be there, we both have things to work on communication-wise that came from all this. I did also see Matt today. That's been settled. I'm pretty satisfied that what I saw was it and there wasn't anything else beyond that, and it was a friend helping her with pain the same way I do. I do want to thank everyone who left a message or DM'd me. Good or bad comments, thank you. Talking to the void and all you strangers helped me wait this out. I appreciate it. I'm going to go enjoy my son's company now. Thank you again. Relevant comments. J7488 Congratulations. This may have gotten buried in the comments, but did your wife have a real understanding of the optics of what you saw? She realized how truly suspicious it looked. OOP, yay, she realizes it after she saw the video herself. Believable toadstool. Also, why are you still not informing Matt's wife of what you walked in on? Feels dishonest. She deserves to know and make her own decision. OOP, I didn't walk in on anything. His wife apparently was aware the entire time because Matt told her what was going on. After my pregnant Sil ignored my son's severe allergy and brought peanut-based snacks into our home, I threw them out. Am I the asshole? Hello, this is a throwaway account and a repost and update of sorts because my post got taken down from the other Am I the Asshole sub. My brother and his wife Laura, who is 7 months pregnant, are staying with us for a week or so since he's interviewing for jobs in the city my family and I are in. My kids love having their aunt and uncle around and everything's been great. Yesterday, Laura went out and came back with groceries. I thanked her but told her that we don't expect them to do this, the kitchen is stocked and that we're just enjoying having them. She said that she wanted to and that most were cravings she's been having. I started helping her unload the bags and noticed that a lot of snacks were with peanuts, cookies, crackers, PB, even some sort of cake fusion. It all made me uneasy because she knows my oldest son, 8M, is extremely allergic. I don't keep anything of the kind in our home because we've had an incident when he was younger, where we almost lost him. I didn't want to be rude, but I told her that I'm not comfortable with having the stuff in the house. She told me that she would be careful, that she wouldn't eat it around him or his siblings, and that she'd clean up after herself, that she was having intense cravings and needed them. Look, I've had 4 kids and kind of get where she's coming from, although I never had to have something, but every woman is different. I made sure my son knew not to touch any of it and to leave her alone when she's eating them. That was that. Today, I woke up early to make breakfast and open the fridge only to be greeted by strawberries dipped in PB left out without a container to chill. The PB jar wasn't sealed properly next to them and there were sandwiches on a plate because she likes the bread cold and soggy. I was pissed. I've read enough about airborne contamination to know that you can't really determine it, but I wasn't risking it. I grabbed a bag and started throwing everything in it, our groceries, hers, I didn't care. I was going to take the bag, drive to a shelter and let them know the situation. Laura woke up while I was on my rampage, came down and asked all upset what I was doing. I was snippy with her and didn't try to hide it. We got in an argument with her defensively saying that I can't do this, that the baby needs it and that it's cruel to put a pregnant woman through unsatisfied cravings. I told her bluntly that I don't give a single fuck. If she can't keep to her word then I won't either, and that she'll live without her craving. My son can't say the same with his allergy. She went back upstairs, packed her bag and came back down, grabbed the bag of food and left in a huff. My brother was at his interview and called me half an hour later to ask me what happened. He was upset with his wife but also with me because nothing happened, and at the end of the day, my son is fine. I told my husband when he came back from work and he's completely on my side. AITA, mini update. Like some people had predicted in the comments on the other sub, Laura did go straight to my family and started complaining. She hadn't twisted anything, told them the full honest story, and my mother was livid. She called me panting like she ran a marathon after she berated Laura to make sure my son is okay, so I can only imagine the riot act she read to her. Apparently, even my stepdad gave Laura one of his disapproving frowns. My brother came back in the evening to get his stuff since Laura had only packed hers for some reason. He apologized for what she did and said that he'll have a chat with her once she's calmed down. She's been inconsolable. He told me that she's been crying since she left my mom's house and that she now feels unwelcome and unloved in our family, and he blames me for it. My husband butted in and told him that it's enough. That whatever she's feeling doesn't cover half of what we felt and that she needs to get over herself. That I've been scrubbing the house from top to bottom for hours because of her actions. I did get panicky and went on to deep clean the whole house, especially the kitchen, but anyway, my brother left after he said that there's no leveling with us when we're being this stubborn. Now that I've had time to get out of the state I was in, I do feel bad that she's distressed and feels unwelcome in our family. That was never my goal. I've been debating sending her an apology, not for my actions because I stand by them, but for the way I went about it. I shouldn't have allowed the stuff in our house in the first place and could have been calmer about it after I opened the fridge. Update. A lot of people asked me to update, so here it is. Warning. This is a long one, and if I wasn't an before, I sure am now. So after my mom berated Laura and my brother yelled at my husband and I took the advice I was given and sent them a long text which ended up being a bit of a ramble about everything. How fucked the situation is. How we're disgusted by their stance and how we'll be going LC until we feel ready to be around them again. That was the day after my brother packed his bags and left. I was left to read and I thought that was that until a few days ago when I got a call from Laura. I thought about not answering it, but curiosity got the better of me. When I picked up, Laura tried to make awkward small talk, but I think she sensed I wasn't in the mood and got right to it. She apologized about her behavior, said she had no excuse other than her hormones, and we ended up having a long chat about everything. By the end of it, I actually felt better and like we could get past it and work on our relationship. She also mentioned that she would still like for my family and I to come to her birthday dinner. It wasn't going to happen in a restaurant anymore. I guess the hotel stay ended up costing them a lot, as some of you predicted, and that it was going to be at their house instead. I told her that I'll talk with my husband and get back to her. I also got a text from my brother apologizing and saying he was just trying to protect and stand by his wife. It was too soon to start mending things, as my husband pointed out, but he left the choice up to me, and I honestly believed her apology because she had never acted like that before and she seemed actually ashamed of herself. Anyway, my sister, who was also apologized to BC, she also tore her a new one. And parents, also got an apology. We're also invited, but my sister's kids wanted a cousin sleepover instead of going with us, so after talking it over with my sister, we agreed for them to have one at my house. My babysitters for a year are my next door neighbors. They're sweet and responsible 16-year twins who live with their single mom. They usually team up and tackle my kids on date nights. There's a reason I'm mentioning this. With my sister's added 2 kids to the mix, I asked their mom if she was free to join their duo and she agreed. So I called Laura and told her that Richard and I are coming. When we got to their house, Laura greeted my husband and I at the door. We handed her the gift and went in, but she seemed puzzled that we didn't have a trail of kids with us, so I reminded her that it's just us adults tonight. Same thing happened when my sister and her husband walked in. Dinner was awkward. No matter how we tried to lighten up the mood, and the conversation was stilted at best, but I thought it was at least a step forward. Laura asked this time about why the kids were not with us, that she had made special food for them. I never mentioned the kids when I got back to her, just my husband and I, but I felt like it was my fault that I didn't clarify, and so I apologized for it and thanked her for thinking of them. My sister chimed in that her kids and mine were having a cousin sleepover tonight and how she was excited about our soon-to-be nephew to join them when he's here and older. Laura looked at her with a smile and said, "Yeah, I'm sure he'll be best friends with his cousins, as in my kids, and his step-cousins, as in my sisters." This pissed me off because we don't step anything with the kids, but I bit my tongue. For context, my sister is technically my stepsister. I know I use stepdad in my first post. I usually call him by his first name. I consider him a parental figure since he raised me since I was 10, but I had a dad and the title will always be his. My sister gave her a hurt look, but it was my brother who nudged his wife with a, "What are you doing?" look. A few minutes went by again with eating and light convo before Laura asked again about our kids, mainly who was watching them since all 4 parents are here. I told her that my neighbor and her daughters are babysitting, to which she laughed at and joked about how incompetent the girls and their mom must be to need all 3 of them to wrangle the kids. Also for context, I have 4 kids. I'm biased and like to think they're well behaved, but they're sometimes too much for one person to handle. Even me, and I'm the one that brought them into this world. Add my sister's 2 kids and it's a lot for 2 teenage girls to handle even for just a few hours. We left at 7, it said we'll be back at 11. It has absolutely nothing to do with the girls whom my kids adore or their mom who is as kind as they come. Before I could retort anything, my mom stepped in with one of her smiles and told Laura that it's so kind of her to offer her own competence and watch the kids next time. That shut her up real fast. After that, dinner was even more awkward until we cleared the table and Laura brought out dessert while my brother got the cake from the fridge. Here's where I lost the last of my remaining brain cells. I went to the bathroom and when I came out, I saw my husband carrying my bag and trying to usher me out of the front door to leave. He looked pissed and I was beyond confused, and obviously resisted because yes, the dinner is a train wreck, but let me at least say goodbye and give a lame excuse for our departure. When my husband tried to literally carry me out, I knew something was wrong, and after a couple of tries, I darted past him back to the dining room. Laura's now ready dessert table consisted of PB cake pops, PB pie, PB cookies, PB brownies, and top it all off, a PB birthday cake that my brother brought in and was sniffing at with a horrified look. Laura then gave me a big smile and said loudly to my family, "I thought I should at least get to have my cravings on my birthday. Get your fill before she throws these out too." I honestly thought for a second that my sister was going to tackle her, and I wasn't that far behind her because all I could think about was the fact that she thought my kids were coming and she planned this accordingly. I felt so guilty for allowing the stuff in our house the last time, and if my sister's kids hadn't wanted the sleepover, I was going to walk my son into danger a second time. I lost my shit. Without thinking about my actions, I grabbed Laura's head, forced her to talk towards my brother, who I think was too shocked to react, and slammed her head straight into the cake. I held it down as long as I could while she flailed and told her I hope she chokes on her cravings before I let her go. I honestly wanted to go for the pie too, but I had embarrassed myself enough by acting like that in the first place, so I told my brother that I'm done with both him and his wife, and if they try to contact me or my family again, I'm filing for a protective order. Then I let my husband lead me out. My sister was cackling as she followed us with her husband, but our parents stayed back. I heard Laura screaming profanities after us, but my stepdad raised his voice, which shut her up. I got a lot of jokes about his frown on my first post, but the man is as stoic as they come. Him showing any emotion is a big deal. I remember that his frown alone growing up was enough to literally stop my sister and I in our tracks, because we knew if he gave us one that we messed up. I haven't asked my mom what happened after we left because I can't handle any more heartache from my brother or his actions. I don't think this was the update anyone wanted, least of all me, but I'm completely done with both of them. Even though my brother looked like he had no idea, the stuff was in his house, happening under his damn roof. I'm sad I won't be in my nephew's life and my kids won't get to know the new cousin they've been waiting for, but I'd rather cry over that than over my son's life. I don't expect anyone to be kind in the comments. I'm 32, I shouldn't have been so naive, and I know I shouldn't have reacted like that, and I'm going to be dealing with that with my therapist along with the guilt I'm feeling, but please take it easy on me, I'm still shaken up. I'm also looking into family therapy for my kids so they can better process not having their uncle and aunt around after them having been a close presence in their lives. Am I the asshole for calling my friend a creepy weirdo after she posted a TikTok about my husband? Original post, I, 28F, am friends with this girl, let's call her June, also 28F. In fact, my husband, 32M, and I often hang out with June and her boyfriend, i.e. go on double dates, have weekend trips, etc. We've known each other for over 2 years. I would say that we 4 were pretty tight as a group, up until this weekend. My husband is an orthodontist. One of his patients is June's half-sister, Rhea, 12F. June often is the one accompanying Rhea to her dental appointments. June is also a small time for online influencers. She's always recording and vlogging and stuff. Though my husband and I have made it clear to her that we're absolutely not okay with our faces in her vlogs online, and she seemed to respect that boundary. We don't use social media, apart from Reddit, and we trusted her word when she said she's not gonna post us online. Cut to last weekend, My brother sent me this TikTok link with the message, "Dude, you gotta watch this." I opened the link and it directed me to June's TikTok account. She doesn't have much followers, less than 10K, but the particular video he sent me had like 500,000 views or likes, I'm not sure which. Lo and behold, it was a video compilation of my husband with the title, "God, I see what you've done for others." The video was honestly the creepiest thing I've ever seen. She had recorded my husband during various of our double dates together, and it was clear he wasn't even aware he's being recorded. In some of the clips, she would start with her face and then pan the camera towards my husband with a cutesy expression and mouthing words like, "Oh my God." The worst one was where he was working on her half-sister, Rhea, wearing scrubs, and she'd recorded even that. She didn't even bother to blur out the kid's face while she was lying on the dental chair. I showed the video to my husband and he was horrified. He said it made him so uncomfortable and violated knowing that someone had been secretly recording him. He was angry that she'd recorded him working on a patient. He texted her asking to take down the video and delete every video she has of him. First she feigned ignorance, then she said that she meant no harm and that it was all for online engagement, since, I quote, "TikTok with hot guys go viral very fast," and that she'd gained a lot of followers after posting that. This was all so weird, but my husband and I got our families and friends to report the video and thankfully it's being taken down now. This pissed off June and she sent me a long-ass text saying how I was jealous of her online success and that I couldn't stand seeing her succeed, blah blah blah. I replied saying, "You're delusional and unhinged. You're not successful and you'll never be. Stay away from us, you creepy weirdo." Now she's all weepy and depressed and has been telling our common friends how mean I was to her. She's also been posting about mental health on her socials and about how mean some women are with their words, lol. AITA. AITA has no consensus bot. OOP was NTA relevant comments commenter. NTA. You and your husband had set clear boundaries and she violated those boundaries. This shows that she doesn't respect you at all. I recommend cutting her off entirely, as anyone who disturbs your peace is not worth your time. OOP. Yes. We're cutting her off entirely. I don't know if her boyfriend is aware of this or not, but I guess he'll have to be collateral damage cause I don't want her to weasel her way back into our lives. Commenter 2, NTA. People who think online engagement is more important than basic human decency are sadly not at all uncommon, and they are, as you say, delusional and unhinged. Their success is not real, and except in a very few cases, it never will be. OP, it's psychotic honestly. My husband is so freaked out about this. I feel so bad for him. Commenter 3. He might need to drop the half-sister as a patient and/or tell the parents that she, June, is not allowed to accompany her anymore. I agree that is a creepy weirdo. If she can't get followers or likes without lying and getting consent for people to be recorded, then she needs to find a new career. OOP, yes, he's in the process of informing her parents. I don't think he's gonna drop her as a patient as her treatment is almost done and it's gonna be a hassle for her to find a new orthodontist. Commenter 4. He needs to ban her sister, your former friend, RL, from the room while he is treating the patient. He needs to have a female staff member assist him and act as chaperone should your friend try to make baseless accusations. OOP, there's a rule in his practice that a female dental assistant has to present whenever they, the male doctors, are working on female patients, as most of the patients are young kids, teens, and they might be more comfortable with a woman around. Even in the video she posted, there is a woman assisting my husband. He's reached out to the kids' parents. They're being given two choices. Either they chaperone their daughter or they need to find a different orthodontist. I really hope it doesn't come to baseless accusations though. Update. I don't want to make another post for the same thing and I doubt I'm going to be updating again. My husband's practice reached out to Rhea's parents and informed them about the situation via an email, as they wanted everything documented, like I mentioned in the comments. The parents have responded. They are shocked and very, very apologetic. They have agreed to chaperone Rhea on her appointments instead of June. They wanted to meet my husband personally to apologize, but he informed them that that won't be necessary. June's TikTok video is still in the process of being taken down. No new updates on that. I guess she contested the reports or something. I'm not entirely sure. My husband and I have blocked her. My brother is keeping an eye on her account though, just in case she posts something else about us. We'll see what to do when it happens. We're gonna be consulting a lawyer if she bothers us again in the future. My husband is kinda shaken up / upset / annoyed about this whole thing. He's taken some days off from work and so have I. We'll plan a trip somewhere maybe, to take his mind off of these things. Right now I need to be there for him. I won't be posting anything for now. We haven't contacted her boyfriend yet. My husband is not in the right headspace right now, and I feel it'll be better if we focus on ourselves for the time being. We don't want the added headache of how the boyfriend will react if he's in on this or whatever. We'll inform him after some time. I know this is selfish, but I think it's for the best. Thank you all for the responses. New update. We thought the drama was done, but nope. We filled June's boyfriend in on everything, and he was shocked, hurt, and confused. Turns out, June managed his social media, and he had no clue what she was posting. He thanked us, and we thought that was it. But then he asked to meet up, saying he needed to discuss something. To be honest, we were extremely hesitant to meet with him. We were so done with the drama and didn't want to get sucked back in. But, he seemed genuinely concerned and willing to listen. So we agreed. At the meeting, he revealed he'd confronted June. She broke down, professed her love, and claimed her obsession with my husband was for social media clout. Apparently, his total package made for great content. When he asked to see her phone, she refused. So he checked her laptop, and found hundreds of sneaky photos and videos of my husband. And for laughs, she had pics of me looking my absolute worst, mouth open while eating, weird faces, the works. I think I'm pretty good looking, but these photos were the opposite. It's like she wanted to prove a point about my husband's ugly wife. June's boyfriend dumped her. But honestly, we're even more freaked out now. The scale of her obsession is terrifying. Hundreds of photos and videos. That's not just a crush, that's fixation. The thought of her escalating to something more is keeping us up at night. As a small consolation, June's boyfriend made her delete the videos from her social media and laptop. But God knows how many more copies she has. Despite June not reaching out after all this went down, we're still on high alert. Her radio silence is kinda unnerving, and we're bracing ourselves for whatever might come next. Hopefully it is in fact just for social media clout, not some weird baby reindeer type obsession with my husband. It's kinda unsettling how she was friends with me for over 2 years. We hung out often. We've gone on weekend trips with her and her boyfriend. We have so many mutual friends, and yet no one knew she's doing this behind our backs. Either I'm bad at reading people or she's very good at being sneaky and deceptive. I'm also mentally kicking myself for not realizing that someone was taking pictures of me. I feel my husband and I both need to be less dumb and more aware of our surroundings, lol. On a brighter note, Raya's parents are super thankful to my husband for still treating Raya after everything. That's it for now. Hopefully, this is really the end. Relevant comments. Commenter 1, just be careful OP, Jane sounds unhinged. Oh OP. We are. It's kinda scary though because she knows where we live / where we usually hang out / where I work / where my husband works. Commenter 2, man, this is some serious soap opera level drama like you said though. Better to stay aware. No one likes being caught off guard. Hopefully it ends soon and you can move on. At least the parenting situation seems good. OP, Raya's parents are wonderful. They were the ones who used to initially accompany Raya to her appointments. They said June told them that she wants to spend more time with Raya and she's otherwise busy so she could be the one chaperoning her. They had agreed because Raya was excited about spending time with her sister. It's really shitty that June was using Raya as a ruse to get near my husband NGL. Commenter 3. Wow, just wow. I would take all the evidence and a statement from the ex to a lawyer and get some type of restraining order requiring her to stay away and remove all social media of you two. She seems unhinged and needs to stay away. This makes me think of a stalker movie and you guys need to change stuff before the movie has a bad ending. OOP, we're gonna be talking to a lawyer to see what options we have. Our apartment has 24-hour security so I doubt she can do anything there. I'm more worried about our workplaces tbh. New update. I really didn't want to update this situation, but things have taken a seriously dark turn. When I posted about June's thing for my husband a month ago, I thought it was just some weird crush. Now, it's flat out terrifying. The day after my last post, my husband got a super creepy message from a random number. You have got it all wrong, please meet me, I'll make you understand. We freaked. Lawyers and cops are on it, trying to get a restraining order. Both our workplaces have ramped up security, and we've warned friends and family to keep an eye out. This whole thing is destroying my husband's mental health. He's anxious 24/7, wondering if he's being followed. He's stopped going to work because the feeling of being watched is overwhelming. We're trying to prioritize his safety. And honestly, it's breaking my heart. The other night, he broke down in tears. I've never seen him cry before. It was shattering. He's been talking to a therapist online, trying to cope with the stress and anxiety. But even that's not easing his mind. He's consumed by fear for my safety, constantly worrying that June will harm me to get to him. We're covering our bases, security cams, dash cams, the whole works. And I've scoured our home twice for any hidden devices, thank God, all clear. If things get worse, we're prepared to get up and move. Honestly, it's better to have a life in a different state than to be dead here. It's heartbreaking to think about leaving our friends, family, and everything behind, but we'll do what it takes to stay safe. Some of the advice on here was really helpful, and I've done most of what was suggested. If someone, anyone, has any more insights, please share. I'm desperate at this point, tbh. My fiance's best man is planning to slut-shame me during his wedding speech as a joke, and I'm unsure how to handle it. What should I do? Original post April 1st, 2024. My fiancé, best man, groomsman, and I have known each other since we were kids. We collectively met between 6th and 7th grade and have been running around in the same friend group ever since. The group has grown and shrunk over the years, but a small core of us have remained extremely close. Recently, my fiancé's best man Jay, 30M, has been making jokes when we're hanging out about the two of us dating that have now escalated. Admittedly, when I met Jay in 6th grade, I had the hugest crush on him, and everyone knew. I was much taller than average for a girl at that age, and he was one of 2 guys in the entire school as tall as me. That, though, is where the story ends. I had one hell of an awkward phase in middle school, and he was very clear from the start that he was not into it. Post-awkward phase, as friends and adults, it was something we constantly joked about, but never seriously, since everything between us had always been platonic. This joke of me being rejected by him has now recently turned into how he dated me first, whenever fiancé and I are around. Despite the inaccuracy and an increase of it being brought up, everything has remained pretty lighthearted in context and, while annoying, is something I have been able to brush off or quickly rebuttal. This escalated this weekend when 2 of fiancé's groomsmen were over hanging out with fiancé and I. The wedding was brought up, and after a concerning look between the two, they mentioned something had happened with Jay they thought we should know about. Apparently Jay had been telling them stories he was considering for his best man speech, with the main one centering around how I had been shared around and had made my way through the entire friend group. While they kept what was explicitly said fairly vague out of respect for me, they were clear it crossed the line and insisted I had slept with the entirety of the group attending the wedding. They were very clear with Jay that he could not say anything like this in his speech, toast. Jay responded with an "I know," stating that I had already made it clear my maid of honor would be proofreading all speeches prior to the wedding, so he wouldn't be able to get away with it anyway. But ended the conversation by saying something along the lines of, "But what if I could?" Leaving the possibility open. Of all the groomsmen in the party, 6 including Jay, these 2 were the only ones in this core friend group, and the only ones I had any sort of history with that could potentially be notable. It was all prior to high school and very innocent. One I went on my first movie date with, where our parents had to drop each of us off because we couldn't drive, and picked us up afterwards. The other was the classic first 6-month relationship in middle school where it took 6 weeks to muster up enough courage to hug each other between classes in the hallway. Sure, we made out and very middle school level things happened, but this is something we've all laughed about now for over a decade. I wasn't the only girl in this larger friend group, and throughout the years, this was something that happened pretty frequently. Because we grew up in a smaller area, overlap happened like this regularly in every group and even more so as we went through high school. My fiancé is the only one I have seriously dated or had any sort of intimate relationship with of this friend group. We had an on-again, off-again relationship throughout high school that ended for a bit once I moved out of state for college, but we remained close friends and eventually reconnected when I moved back in 2019. We started dating in 2021 and got engaged in 2023. He's the only one in all of this I've ever slept with, who has seen me naked, and so on, making this situation even more odd and off-putting. Jay and I have been close friends since high school. When fiancé was in a toxic relationship that isolated him from Jay after I'd left for college, Jay would reach out to me for advice on school, girls, relationships and more. He had always been our #1 supporter, advocating for fiancé and I to reconcile our relationship throughout college and into adulthood. He even took a bit of credit and would throw around an "I told you so" here and there when we eventually did reconnect. I'm not sure how to handle this. I could write an additional post about how frustrated, confused, wronged, and uncomfortable I feel, all of which I plan to discuss in more detail with fiancé after sitting on the issue for a bit longer. We've all talked about it, recognizing the way Jay is framing things is wrong, but fiancé and the groomsmen are able to brush it off in a way I feel like I can't. I don't know how to move forward from this or what to do next. Additional information: fiancé and I aren't getting married until the end of next summer, so much of the conversations we had about toasts and speeches have been more theoretical, Except that a few have asked for the opportunity to give a toast, including best man. We have loosely put this information in Save the Dates, on the website, and other prints. Fiancé and best man have been best friends since kindergarten. They were neighbors and inseparable until they each went their own way for college. My fiancé's parents basically raised him alongside fiancé. Jay has strictly only ever expressed platonic feelings for me. Even when both single, or alone together, we have only ever acted as friends towards each other after the embarrassing early middle school crush I had. TLDR, my fiancé's best man is lying about having history with me as well as my history with others, proposing the idea that he calls me out as a joke for being shared around their friend group in his best man speech, toast at our wedding. I don't know how to move forward from this or what to do next. Update April 3, 2024. First, I wanted to thank those who were clear and honest about how alarming the situation was from their perspective. When posting, I was still processing various feelings about the matter, and still am, which not only limited my ability to really look at the situation from a different perspective, but also left me in a state of paralysis of what to do next, both long and short term. Given the nature of this situation, there was a lot of historical context that was omitted to avoid making the original post too lengthy. I have done my best to include the context that seems most relevant based on the original comments in my update below. Update. Since posting, I have spoken in further detail to both my fiancé and one of the other groomsmen. I also confided in my maid of honor about the situation for an additional perspective outside of this specific friend group. After these conversations and reading through all comments on the original post, I've come to realize the significance of a few key details. Jay has a deep-rooted superiority complex. He always has, and it is something many in our friend group have become accustomed to. He has always been the type who seemed to believe he was the standout amongst his friends. Whether that be through education, athletics, his career, or with women. Jazz has also always been a bit egocentric, and a lack of accountability or consequences for his actions has been growing for some time now. Despite it almost always being unintentional, he more often than not is oblivious to the inconveniences and harm he causes others, as long as it is beneficial to his personal ego. This is about jealousy from a few different angles, but not about me specifically. When looking at the full picture, this escalation feels like a continued attempt to knock my fiancé down for reaching that next stage in life. Whether that is because fiancé has reached it before him or has moved onward without him, I cannot say for sure. Jay has issues with misogyny that have also been escalating in tangent with everything else. His lack of respect for the women he has dated has also seemed to increase. Much of the personal tension he and I have had recently pertained to his perspective of women that have begun to veer into a more disrespectful realm, alluding to an increased belief that due to their gender alone, women are inferior. The good friend he was to me over the years, who was always kind and supportive, who never overstepped boundaries and was always there when needed, can exist in tangent with the above information. They are not mutually exclusive. Life happens and people grow, sometimes in opposite directions. I spoke in depth with one of the groomsmen to have further transparency of the situation and what was explicitly said. He acknowledged that the conversation initially centered around the excitement they had for the wedding, and Jay clearly stated he wanted to give fiancé and I the best wedding and experience possible. The conversation evolved and Jay mentioned looking for icebreakers for his speech toast and began bouncing a variety of distasteful jokes that focused more so on the expense of my fiancé than anything else. Then the idea was proposed about explicitly stating that my being passed around the friend group was how they all remained relatively close since middle school and high school. Jay was immediately shut down by the other groomsmen, told to know his audience, and also recognize he was openly alluding to things that were untrue and that could have an extremely negative impact on me personally. The conversation stopped shortly after this and the groomsmen, without context of how this issue had been escalating, chalked it up to a one-off situation with Jay acting full of himself in the moment. Fiancé and I are the first of our cohort to get married and have a full-blown wedding with a ceremony and reception. These comments did not start escalating until after our engagement roughly 1 year ago, following Jay's breakup with his long-term girlfriend. Jay has never made comments like this to me or my fiancé privately or when it is just the three of us together. Any scenario where this has been an issue has been in an environment which involved others, and mostly others that are not a part of this cohort from middle school. So what next? As mentioned in my original post, I spoke with fiancé in detail about the situation and how I was feeling. When all of this had been brought to our attention a few days prior, in an attempt to preserve myself in the moment, I brushed it off more so than I probably should have. I do not blame fiancé for not having any immediate or strong reaction in the moment, because I had avoided one myself. I think it's important to note that Jay is not a day-to-day character in our lives. While he travels frequently for work that brings him to our area, we live states apart. He has not lived in the same area as me or my fiancé since high school. Much of this evolution with his personality has happened in the last few years as well. I recognize this is not an excuse for the lack of accountability on our part, but felt it added important context that this was not something that was observed and ignored daily, but one that has slowly been recognized over time, since we maybe see him 4 times a year at most. Fiancé was extremely open in conversation, immediately brought up having a conversation with Jay, but admitted to not viewing this as anything more than Jay just being Jay and that he was all talk. At this point, we had only discussed how Jay had continually escalated the situation and how uncomfortable I had now become from this. The lack of accountability fiancé had made for Jay's action definitely hurt, but then I recalled a commenter who had asked if I still considered Jay a friend because he actually was, or because that was how it has always been. To sum up what turned into a lengthier and much more productive conversation with fiancé, I told him that while I recognized his friendship with Jay was something that had always been a part of his life, I did not personally want to be friends with him anymore after this. I brought to fiancé's attention that while the scenario was explicitly about me, and attacking the integrity and character of a 12-year-old girl, every action or usage of the scenario was used against him to invalidate his accomplishments of getting married or make him come off as less than. I told fiancé it was up to him on how he handles his conversation with Jay, but regardless, the disrespect Jay had shown me in this was a clear statement of what he thought of our own personal friendship. I firmly believe it is not my place to force how my fiancé handles his own personal relationship with Jay in this. All of this was deeply taken to heart, and you could tell that fiancé had started coming to his own realizations as the conversation progressed. He recognized that if the roles were reversed, or if it had been any one of my bridesmaids slandering me or him in any way, he would be firmly advocating for me to reevaluate my friendship with them. Fiancé asked for a few days to stomach the information himself and reflect on what he wants to say to Jay. He asked if it would be acceptable for him to bring up that I no longer wanted to be friends with Jay personally, and I said yes. I was clear that if Jay wanted to talk with me following their conversation as well, it would need to be the 3 of us and not a personal conversation. I am still evaluating how to approach the speeches toasts at our wedding and be open to perspectives and ideas. For now, I reserve the right with my fiancé to omit Jay from giving a speech and having my fiancé choose another groomsman to do so in his place, potentially canceling the speeches toasts altogether, and if Jay is allowed to give a toast, telling the DJ to cut the mic if need be. All of which he agreed with. There is still plenty of time for the situation to develop, and for potential future updates, but I wanted to again thank those that emphasized the seriousness of this issue, gave their honest input and advice on how to handle the situation, and provided perspective on what they believe should be done next. When originally posting, I was still in a state of shock, trying to accept the situation as it had unfolded. Your responses constructively pushed me into the reality of what was happening, and what I was feeling. Relevant comments. Additional info, miserably winning. Wow, I have a couple of comments. How were you fiancé friends with this guy for that long and been okay with his behavior? Why is his best man so comfortable to even joke about something like that? Why does he need time to digest cutting him off? Why is he even still involved in the wedding? Personally, I wouldn't allow anyone to disrespect my significant other, let alone someone I'm supposed to be marrying. Best man or not. I think they are both walking red flags. Jay for being a misogynist and your fiancé for not cutting him out of the wedding and his life. These things can be taken as a joke for sure, but the level of disrespect is too great and your fiancé should stick up for you if he has any shroud of decency and respect for you as his fiancé and soon-to-be wife. OOP happy to answer, since I think it will be helpful for many. I also added a very small edit to the update to acknowledge a bit of this. Much of this behavior has developed over time and apart from all of us. As a kid he always had a superiority complex, but he was also very kind and respectful. It came off more as immaturity than anything else. Plus, at the time, we were kids too. Following high school, Jay and I each moved a significant distance away from where we grew up. He still lives that far away. We get together maybe 4 times a year at most, and I genuinely believe he did not see me as more than some woman to use as collateral to knock his friend down when he made those comments. Fiancé has no brothers, and Jay has always been a part of his life, filling that space. Jay also has no immediate family in his life and hasn't for quite some time, making fiancé's role a bit more impactful. It is much more similar to him cutting off a brother than just another friend. Fiancé has also always been extremely kind and had a very peaceful soul. Don't get me wrong, while fiancé prefers to avoid conflict, he has always been willing to stand up when necessary as well. I don't believe he realized how much had been at his expense as of late until after our conversation. Given their long history, I believe he's reflecting on a lot more than just this specific situation. The wedding is still over a year away, and not until the end of next summer. And this all has happened in less than a week. Neither fiancé nor I have talked with Jay yet, so I did not feel it was right to post about any hard decisions regarding cutting him from the wedding, and so on. These things can be taken as a joke, but the level of disrespect is too great, and your fiancé should stick up for you if he has any shroud of decency and respect for you as his fiancé and soon-to-be wife. This was a huge part of the larger conversation we had and something my fiancé acknowledged as well. I think initially, it was viewed under the lens of us collectively being childhood friends, and fiancé as the mediator, rather than the lens of me as his wife until our second, much larger conversation. OOP's reply about the fiancé's reaction: it's only been a handful of days since this all came to light. I wish your fiancé's reaction had been more about coming to your defense than Jay's, but understand that sometimes people need time to truly process all that contributes to a messy situation, especially one with deep roots and close ties. Thank you for conveying this so well. I did my best to add an emphasis to this, but could not do so as well in my own words and fear it got lost in the length of the post, something for me to work on in future posts for sure. I very much have worries, and knowing my personality, will also be worried day of. I expressed this to my fiancé as well, and he completely understood. I recognize there is still plenty of concern to still address with my fiancé, but given how fresh this situation is, I wanted to afford myself a little grace of absorbing my feelings for what has happened before figuring out exactly what to do. I lost a friend too. New update 2 October 11th, 2024. I'm considering canceling our wedding and calling off our engagement over a pizza. TLDR. After canceling his health insurance without discussion or my knowledge, and a severe lack of support, consideration and accountability, I'm considering calling everything off. Buckle up, because this is a long one. While the drama around my fiancé's best man has simmered, the deeper issues surrounding a lack of support have not. Apologies in advance for this not being centered around my fiancé's best man. Not much has honestly changed. A conversation between them was had, much of which was my fiancé assuring him that things would blow over and accommodating Jay's stresses that it was only a joke. While my fiancé acknowledged what was said was wrong, the conversation wasn't to set boundaries. I eventually had to have my own conversation with Jay that my fiancé stood silently in the room for. I reached my breaking point 2 weeks ago. Following everything with his best man and a few other challenges we'd been facing, I tried putting my best foot forward these past 6 months. I sought out therapy to address the lack of support and anxiety I was feeling and have made intentional efforts to work on our relationship to ensure we were in a stronger place before committing to each other. In May, after some unexpected and startling health concerns requiring an emergency room visit, my fiancé came clean to me about secretly canceling his health insurance in January without talking to or telling me. When I asked him why, he blamed the cost of the wedding being too expensive and wanting to save the $150 a month, taking no other accountability for his actions, outside of an apology. I have a small amount of experience in accounting and have budgeted the wedding down to the last dollar. This has included the consideration of inflation and other potentials as well. In total, from the smallest decoration to the cost of a marriage certificate, everything comes down to around $22,000, all of which I have strategically budgeted for throughout our 2-year engagement. My parents have graciously given us $14,000 as well to help with the expenses, and I have personally taken on the price of my dress, wedding bands, and a slightly larger portion of the vendors. To put it simply, while it may not be as much as others, we have privilege. Not only was there no need for this cancellation, but I have yet to see any of that additional support for expenses. Regardless, in response, I took it upon myself to take more of the costs on and pursue a part-time job on top of my full-time position that earns roughly $70,000 a year. While it's not by a large margin, I do make the most between us individually, and have a larger responsibility in my daily work life with longer hours and a significant level of expected travel as a result. The choice to take on a part-time role was not one of want, but of desire to ease the burden he was feeling. I started a role reviewing blogs, essays, resumes, and other forms of writing in July, and our relationship quickly unraveled. Because I commute, I typically arrive home 3 hours after my fiancé. After arriving, I would immediately have to hop on my laptop and review writings for the next 2 hours or so to stay on top of my quota. I tried my best to make a routine out of it, so we would have intentional time together once I finished each night. This was met with cold shouldering, frustration, and a lack of consideration for my level of exhaustion and strain for months. Anytime I asked him to choose a show to watch or decide on dinner, he usually does cook because I get home so much later. While I revised, I was met with scoffs and accusations that I no longer cared to tend to our relationship. I tried countless times to address his frustrations and was shut out or cornered in a circular argument about my priorities. 2 weeks ago, I was slated to travel for my full-time position to Atlanta during Hurricane Helene. In a matter of 12 hours, my afternoon flight for the next day was shifted to one leaving at 5 a.m., to give me ample time to shelter in place prior to the arrival of the storm. I rushed home to finish packing and prepare myself to drive over an hour to the airport and stay at a hotel nearby for additional flexibility in case of issues surrounding my early travel that next morning. After arriving home, I immediately hopped in the shower and asked my fiancé to order dinner so we could have one final meal together. During my shower, he offered to order a hot honey, jalapeno, and pineapple pizza from a new place we'd been wanting to try. Which I normally would have been happy to try. However, I don't like jalapeno the way some people don't like cilantro, and am avidly against pineapple on pizza. Something that's come up multiple times during our relationship. And while I'm good with spice, the idea of taking that on with the travel stress and early start time I had the next day made me hesitant. I calmly asked if there was another option for tonight and if we could try that specific pizza once I got home instead, expressing my concerns over my nerves, which received a frustrated scoff and sarcastic response of, "What then, just cheese?" I explained any other topping combination would work, and restated my issues. He walked out of the bathroom without response and I finished my shower. The pizza was never ordered, no food was ordered. I followed up as soon as I got out of the shower, asking if there was another option he wanted or a place he wanted to consider, and received a prompt no. As I finished getting ready, I asked if anything had been ordered again, and no. I finally snapped and begged and demanded him to order the hot honey pizza because I was out of time. He accused me of making him feel like he's forcing me into the decision, but after a bit of back and forth, the pizza was ordered and the mood immediately shifted. Everything was peaceful, warm, and loving at home up until I left. Yet I cried the entire hour and 15-minute drive to the airport hotel. I cried the entire next day, throughout the storm in Atlanta, and the entire day after. Following a lack of sleep, stress, and intense emotions, I had a complete mental breakdown, realizing I can't live like this. I called my fiancé and poured out every frustration, emotion, and feeling, which I admit was probably not presented in the best light, but none of it was well received. In the 2 weeks since, despite many attempts, conversations have gone nowhere, with only ultimatums being offered for me to make. I've proposed countless alternatives that focus on us working on ourselves and together these next few months, but he is only seeking an answer to whether or not we will be getting married next summer, and has made it known this is a decision that must be made by the end of October. At this point, I don't see how I can possibly gain the confidence to commit myself to him by next summer. For the sake of not doubling the length of this post, I will leave it at this for now. All of this is being discussed with my therapist. At this time, he has chosen not to pursue counseling with me, despite my asking and advocating. Many words have been expressed, and I'm trying. But I'm starting to second guess and waver on just how far love can get me through all of this. My parents and golden child sister ditched me on my 15th birthday, so I threw a fake party with their work friends and exposed the truth. I celebrated my 15th birthday 3 days ago, but things didn't go as expected. On the morning of my birthday, my parents enthusiastically informed me that they had planned a surprise family trip to the Poconos. I was ecstatic since, as the less important younger sibling, I rarely get surprises like this. I was quite happy. However, a few hours later, when I finished packing and walked downstairs with my bags, I discovered that my parents had already left. Only my older sister, Alex, 17F, the golden child, was there for me. She smiled, so I knew something was wrong. When I questioned what was going on, she said I didn't need to pack my things and could go back upstairs to unpack. I assumed the trip had been canceled, but she informed me that there would be no family vacation for me and handed me a sheet of paper with a list of responsibilities. I was perplexed until she stated that my parents and she had agreed that, despite the fact that they had surprised me with the vacation that morning, they had a debate, and Alex believed it would be best for me to stay home and study because our finals were approaching. She, of course, got to leave because she had completed her assignments. If I became bored, I could do household tasks. Then she chuckled and said I should thank her for giving me time to study rather than spending it with our family. I was so wounded that all I could do was inquire where our parents were. Alex informed me that she had already dispatched them to the airport and had stayed behind to tell me in person as a birthday gift to me. She explained that my parents couldn't bring themselves to break my heart, so they let Alex give the news, which she obviously loved. I knew she enjoyed embarrassing me. I returned upstairs with my things, resisting the impulse to cry in front of her. After hearing the front door close, I broke down and cried for an hour. Alex had always despised me and I knew my parents would always support her. But I never expected them to be so harsh, particularly on my birthday. After I cooled down, I became enraged. I had texted my pals earlier, explaining that I couldn't hang out due to the trip and now I was trapped at home alone. So I decided to get revenge at my folks and Alex. I went to my father's office and used his MacBook to discover essential contacts. I called everyone and invited them to a surprise anniversary party for my parents that evening. Because I was only a child, the majority of them agreed to attend, thinking it was charming. I did the same for my mother's contacts, and because neither of them had password-protected devices, it was simple. Then I decided to text Alex's boyfriend on Instagram, inviting him to the party that evening. I also invited my own friends and had them help me decorate the house to make it look like a party. Around 7 p.m., the visitors I had invited began to arrive, but they were surprised to see that my parents were not present. I kept telling them it was a surprise and they'd find out what was going on later. After all of the guests had come and we had taken a group shot, I decided to carry out my plan. I informed the guests where my parents were and how they treated me. I explained how my parents always did everything Alex said and how I was treated like Cinderella. I had never discussed any of this before that day. I told how my parents had abandoned me on my birthday, without even trying to explain in person, since Alex thought it was the appropriate thing to do. Many people were startled because my parents presented themselves as lovely and decent. However, respectable people do not do this to their children. After I completed telling my narrative, I explained that this was exactly why I organized the party, to expose my parents and sister. Finally, I showed them the chore list Alex had left for me. I could see Alex's boyfriend standing in the corner, stunned, because he had no realized Alex had such a vicious side. Everyone was silent following my remarks. People eventually began to leave, some without saying anything, while others approached me to console me before leaving. The only thing I felt guilty about was wasting their time, but I was not too concerned. After everyone left, I texted the group photo to my parents and Alex with the following caption: "Had some people over for my birthday party today. I believe I'll start with the list Alex left me." It was a fantastic strategy. My parents reacted quickly after I sent the message, insisting that I solve everything right away and informing me that they would be returning on the next aircraft. I blocked them all and went to my closest friend Fiona's house with my belongings, knowing that my home was no longer mine. Fiona and her parents were lovely people who always said their doors were open. So I decided to take them up on their offer. I had no idea how long they could sustain me, but I was pleased they opened their home so generously. On my birthday, I did not hear from my parents. But the next day, they went to Fiona's place. Nobody was shocked that I had decided to stay with Fiona, as we had been best friends since childhood. When they arrived, Fiona's parents refused to let them in, claiming they had no business trying to talk to me after I'd made it obvious I was not interested. However, my parents began to threaten legal action against Fiona's parents. I was afraid, so I told them to invite my folks in and I'd be ready to chat. My folks were infuriated. They said I had no right to contact their business associates because their reputation was already tarnished. None of their co-workers or associates were ready to speak with them anymore, and some had even blocked my mother and father. They blamed me for this, which was understandable given that I planned the entire operation. I informed them that if they had been kind and not insulted me on my birthday, I would not have done this. I ended up yelling at them for always treating me worse than Alex, saying to them they had ruined my life and that I would never forgive them. Things became quite hot, and we were all yelling at each other so fiercely that Fiona's parents had to intercede. Fiona had to take me out of the room to help me calm down. When I finally calmed down, her parents approached me and told me that my parents had departed. They also told me that my parents would not be able to speak with me until I was ready to face them. Then Fiona's parents advised me to pursue legal action, such as emancipation, because it had become evident that my parents couldn't care less about me. They felt it was time I cut them out of my life for good. After discussing this with Fiona's parents, I decided to consult a lawyer, and we are currently considering emancipation. I'm still perplexed because this is a big decision, and I don't want to regret it in the future. However, at the current rate, I doubt I will. Yesterday, my parents contacted me again about my choice. Last evening, I received an email from my parents, which I recognized based on the address. I tried hard not to open it, but curiosity got the best of me and I read it. They began by saying that the reason they surprised me with the vacation was that one of my father's clients had opened a new spa and resort in the Poconos, which was a bonus for my father. He had chosen to seize the opportunity around the same time as my birthday. However, when Alex mentioned my exams, they didn't want my grades to suffer simply because I went on vacation with them. They couldn't believe I had misinterpreted the situation and attempted to get revenge on them for it. They stated it made them feel like they had failed to raise me properly. According to them, Alex was simply attempting to be a nice, caring big sister, and there was no reason for me to overreact. It was all rubbish, and I was quite irritated. I almost gave up reading halfway through, but the second portion was about how furious they were that I had included others in our family drama and aired our dirty laundry in public. They stated that they never expected or wanted this to happen. They said that if I had just spoken to them directly about my concerns, they might have been able to resolve them. Instead, I took such harsh measures. They conceded that Alex's list of responsibilities was excessive, but they stated I should have called and questioned them about it. They said that if they had known I felt excluded, they would have returned right away. They insisted that the manner I handled the matter was unexpected, and they felt awful about it. They said that it was an unfortunate mistake that had been blown out of control. They want me to talk to them and work things out, but I'm not sure what I want to do. I have extremely mixed thoughts about this. Please help me. Am I the jerk for holding a party and exposing my parents to their co-workers and business associates after they ignored me while on vacation? Update 1. Okay, so most of you believe that what I did was perfectly acceptable and that they deserved it, therefore I have nothing to apologize for. I've decided not to apologize. I disabled the email address they used to contact me, so they couldn't reach me again. I know they may build a new one and try to contact me, but I'll just continue to block them. I've decided that regardless of what they say, I will not answer or even read it. It's simply not worth it, it will only exacerbate my problems. As for emancipation, I've chosen to go for it. It's a big deal, and I know I'm still young, but Fiona and her parents have guaranteed me that they'll be by my side no matter what happens. They even offered to formally adopt me if it would make me feel more comfortable, which it could, but I haven't considered it yet. We're now simply working on emancipation, and the paperwork is being completed as we speak. I'm not sure how my parents will respond, because when they wrote me the email, I could tell they were unhappy that I'd chosen to live with Fiona and her parents. This makes little sense to me because, based on how I've been treated throughout my life, it's clear that they don't want me around as much as they want Alex. That is evident to me, but they are still attempting to reach out, which is perplexing. I have a feeling they only want me back to improve their reputation and image, nothing else. Right now all I can do is wait for them to receive the emancipation paperwork and see how they respond. It's been a few days since my post, and they haven't contacted me again after that email, so I'm not sure how they're feeling right now. I know things can't be going well for them because many people attended the party, and I've heard from others that Alex and her boyfriend split up. No one knows why, but me. Update 2. My parents received the documentation for my formal emancipation a few days ago, and they were not pleased, which surprised me. They phoned Fiona's parents, and there was a heated argument. Apparently, my parents assumed Fiona's family had set me up and were controlling me, believing I wasn't acting on my own free will. This didn't make sense to me. Do they know how terribly they've treated me in the past? Of course, I am doing this on my own accord. I had anticipated this type of reaction following my previous post, as many of you pointed out that they merely wanted me back to maintain their image as a happy family. They probably assumed everything I said during the party was simply me being bratty. When I didn't return to them, it enraged them because I was finally standing up for myself, and they couldn't take it. Unfortunately, this is already happening. They can call Fiona's parents whatever they want, but it won't change the fact that they deserve it, and they no longer deserve to be my parents. Fiona told me that my parents called her parents every term in the book and threatened to take them to court, stating they had no right to subject me to this. They also threatened to injure them, which is ridiculous because it is prohibited and will just make them appear worse. The way they spoke to Fiona's parents only confirmed what I already knew. They don't want me back out of love, but rather to improve their image. Fiona's parents were accused of attempting to destroy my parents' reputation by portraying themselves as saviors and revealing to the world that I had been abused. My parents vowed that they would not let that happen. They complained about how I was an entitled brat and that by supporting me, Fiona's parents were demonstrating that they were unsuitable to be parents themselves. If my parents truly loved me as a daughter, they would be more concerned about my well-being and would make an effort to communicate with me directly. Instead, they're shrieking at Fiona's parents, saying that they're trying to ruin their reputation. The thought that Fiona's parents would wish to ruin my parents is absurd. They only know each other through Fiona and me, so they have no motivation to compete. Furthermore, there's no comparison. Fiona's parents are far more prosperous, caring and sympathetic. My parents are so anxious about their image that they believe Fiona's parents are like them, incapable of actually caring for me and simply out to pull them down. I urgently want to inform my parents that Fiona's family isn't just pretending to be my saviors, they actually are. I needed to be saved from my parents. And if they had just realized it in the first place, they would have apologized for what they had done rather than attempting to create even more drama. But Fiona and her parents have given me specific instructions not to contact them, no matter how tempted I am, since it isn't worth it. I know they received the phone call from my parents a few days ago, and after arguing with them over the phone and giving me only the information they believed was vital for me to know, they informed me that they had recorded the call. My parents were extremely ignorant, since this tape may be used as proof of why I deserve to be freed from them. They also asked me to consider whether I wanted them to legally adopt me or not. I ended up saying yes because I truly like them. And I know it will irritate my parents even more, but that isn't the major reason. It's largely because I believe they are really kind-hearted and great people, and having Fiona as my sister will be a bonus. So I'm totally in. They informed me that they will speak with the lawyer again to begin the paperwork for that as well, as it may help with my emancipation case, knowing that I have better people to depend on and live with. To be honest, this is only getting better, and I am very grateful to them. Update 3. Hello, something terrible occurred today. Long story short, Alex beat the snot out of me after school. My last class, English, was conducted in the east wing of the school, and as I was leaving, she and a group of her pals literally cornered me. Unfortunately, I am always the last person to leave class since I am slow at gathering my belongings, and by the time I exited, most of the students had already left. When I saw Alex and her pals standing outside, I was a little afraid, but I didn't show it because it would only help them win. As I was about to leave the classroom, they came all up in my face and told me I couldn't leave. They forced everyone else in the class to leave and informed me that they needed to settle some scores with me. I tried to remain calm and level-headed so that my worry did not show, but they did not appear to care. Alex grabbed my arm and walked me outside while I begged at her to let me go, but everyone else was so noisy that I couldn't be heard. Then they carried me to the janitor's closet and forced me inside. I kept knocking on the door, but they stood outside, and even if someone heard me, they wouldn't dare to intervene because Alex and her pals are seniors with a bad reputation. After approximately 5 minutes, Alex let me out. But by then, practically everyone had left, leaving me alone with them. When the first smack landed on my face, Alex began yelling at me. She described me as selfish and ungrateful to our parents. Then came the real reason she was so angry. She accused me of being the reason her boyfriend broke up with her. She banged my head into the concrete, and I became disoriented. She took advantage of this by repeatedly hammering me with her fist while her buddies laughed. It was terribly painful, and I attempted to defend myself, but Alex is several inches taller and considerably heavier, so there wasn't much I could do. At one point, I just cowered against the wall, and she kept beating me. When she was finished, she kicked me one more time before leaving with her buddies while I wailed against the wall. About 15 minutes later, Fiona discovered me sitting on the floor, crying profusely. When I informed her what had happened, she helped me get up, and instead of walking home, we grabbed a cab because I was in no shape to walk. When we came home, we told her parents everything, and they looked glum. They quickly contacted the school, followed by the police. It's barely been an hour and they've spent the entire time on the phone, but Fiona is taking care of me. I'm fairly bruised up, the bruises are just beginning to show and everything hurts. But I know Alex will receive her karma for this and it will come soon. Update 4. Hello, I have a lot of things to say, but I will try to make it short and sweet. Alex banged me up last week, but happily, the school stood up for me. They shared security footage from that part of the building with the police, making it simple to charge her with a misdemeanor. She received community work to compensate for it, but the best part was that she was suspended for the following 6 weeks. That means she won't be able to attend prom, which she was really looking forward to. She will also be seated separately for her finals, rather than with the rest of her class, which means she will be unable to scam her way out of them. I believe it is well deserved, and I felt vindicated when Fiona informed me about it all. Another wonderful thing that happened was that, following the disaster with Alex, my parents chose to relinquish their rights to me. That's correct, they have terminated their parental rights, and the paperwork has been signed. So I'm finally free, and Fiona's parents are about to legally adopt me. I'm really grateful to them for it. My parents told me that after everything that had happened, they no longer wanted me in their family. I know they'll attempt to make it appear that I'm at fault, but I don't think anyone will believe them. It makes no difference to me if they give it their all. To be honest, I am finally part of a happy family. I can assure you that my new sister and parents will be considerably superior to those I had previously. I can't believe it's finally working out for me. This is possibly the happiest I have felt in a long time. I even forgot about my upcoming finals, but Fiona and I are going to crack on and show everyone what I'm made of. My mom married a younger guy and wanted him to walk me down the aisle instead of my dad. When I said no, she skipped my wedding. Hello everyone, So I had a terrible disagreement with my mom a few days ago, on the day of my wedding, or rather, after everything was done. It was entirely her fault, but I recently spoke with my grandmother and unwittingly made matters worse for her. That is why I have begun to question whether what I did was justified or not. I'm 24F and have been with my partner, 24M, for the past 10 years. We began dating in high school, and he is the love of my life. So this wedding was a big event for me. We got engaged last year and spent months trying to make it an experience that everyone would remember. He and I had saved a lot of money to pay for it, but my mother was unconcerned. My parents split when I was 6 years old, and they have been co-parenting me ever then. They never got along, and I honestly don't know how they managed to stay married for so long. They were married for about 3 years before I was born and were together for another 6 years before splitting up. Most children are upset when their parents tell them they are getting divorced, but when they explained it to me, I was ecstatic. For me, it meant they wouldn't have to fight every day, and if they were happy, I might finally have a chance to be happy as well. As a child, I was satisfied with their decision, and they shared custody of me. I'd spend half the month at my father's house and the other half at my mother's. Unfortunately, I rejoiced too soon. I didn't understand that even in a co-parenting arrangement, they'd have to communicate with each other and reach an agreement on issues concerning me. They struggled even with that. They were continually bad-mouthing each other in front of me, making me feel caught in the crossfire. Both believed the other was out to make things tough for them, and I tried to be understanding as a child. But by middle school, I'd had enough. While staying with my father, he got into a disagreement with my mother because she wanted to rearrange the schedule to accommodate an event, which he did not agree with. I began to feel like a burden for both of them. That night, I packed a few belongings and went away. I was just 12. I walked to the bus stop, but because there was a scary person there, I retreated to a park near my house and decided to go to the bus station in the morning. Fortunately, I fell asleep in the park, and nothing happened to me. By daybreak, my father had recognized I was missing and called the cops. I was taken home safely. When my parents realized I had ran away, they confronted me about my situation. I told them they made me feel like a burden since they were constantly arguing over me. That's when they agreed to be better to one another for my sake. They had no idea I'd take such drastic measures in response to their behavior. After that, my father stuck to his word. Even when he battled with my mother, he didn't tell me about it so I didn't feel bad. My mother, on the other hand, would periodically forget and yell at me about my father. It made things difficult because I genuinely loved both of my parents. Neither were villains, they simply couldn't get along, making parenting difficult for them. It's difficult to raise a child when you dislike each other, but my father made an effort. My mother, on the other hand, did not take her vow very seriously. Eventually, I became closer to my father. Instead, I would spend time with her when I visited her on her turn to have me, and we would have a good time together. So I didn't love her any less, but I felt closer to my father. After I grew up and departed for college, my father maintained in touch with me more than my mother. So right now, I would certainly declare that I favor my father over my mother. However, I have always treated them with equal love and respect. What happened recently was simply too entitled for me to handle, so I ended up hitting out at her. My parents dated other individuals following their divorce, and my father decided to marry again around 4 years ago. He had been dating my stepmother for over 3 years by that point, and their relationship was serious, so it made sense for him to marry again. Prior to that, he had only had a couple of relationships that went nowhere. My mother, however, took a slightly different approach. She would only have flings after the divorce and would not commit to anyone, even if the other guy was interested. I'm not judging her, that's her decision, and I respect it. But then she contacted me unexpectedly around 6 months ago and informed me she had been seeing a guy for a few months and the two of them had decided to marry. She wanted me to be present for the wedding. I had no idea what was going on because everything happened so quickly and unexpectedly. But she told me she was confident in this person, and he appeared to be confident in her as well. She had a good time for many years, but now she wished someone would be there for her. Her husband, James, false name, had just been with my mother for 4 months when they married, and they appeared to be in love. But I was apprehensive about their bond. For starters, he was about a decade younger than her. Furthermore, they had only known one another for a short period of time. James had proposed they marry, and my mother had mentioned it often at the ceremony. But I don't think she realized that wasn't the circumstance she expected, because it only made things appear more suspicious. I tried to talk to her about it, but she dismissed me and said she was certain of her decision. So I didn't explore it further since I didn't want to come out as judgmental. For what it's worth, he seemed to be into her. So I went to the wedding, along with a handful of her close friends and relatives. I even wished them the best. When I informed my father about all of this, he was startled that she had married someone she had only known for a few months. But by then it had already been completed. After that, I was too preoccupied with preparing my own wedding to worry about what was going on with my mother and James, who appeared content enough. They've been married for 6 months, and I haven't seen her much because she spends all of her time traveling with him. She didn't even come to my bridal shower, but I had no complaints. However, the night before my wedding, while we were all at the hotel, she knocked on my door and informed me that she had something extremely important to talk about with me. So I allowed her inside. That's when she decided to inform me that she overheard me talking to my father about leading me down the aisle, and she assumed I'd asked James to do it. At the rehearsal supper, she expected me to ask James, but I didn't. Even though I had previously asked her, I decided to have both of my parents follow me down the aisle since I felt it would be more appropriate for my family dynamics. I did not want my mother to feel left out. I had no idea why she was even discussing James. I was shocked that she would think such a thing. I'd only known James for a few months, and as long as my father was alive, I wasn't going to let any random person accompany me down the aisle on my wedding day. To me, James was simply my mother's husband, not my stepfather. I made it quite plain to her. I informed her that I had no plan of asking James at any time, and if she thought I would, she was misinformed. I'd never mentioned or hinted at anything like that, so I had no idea why she suddenly believed it. It was just ridiculous. To make matters worse, when she realized I was serious and that my biological father would be walking me down the aisle instead of her husband, she threw a fit in my room. She stated that if this were the case, she and James would not attend the wedding. Apparently, she had assumed that I was closer to her, and so James would be the one to walk me down the aisle. She felt that if both she and my father accompanied me down the aisle, it would convey the incorrect message and make James feel insecure. She kept having her tantrums, but I didn't have time for them, especially the night before my wedding, when I needed to sleep. So I ended it by informing her that if she didn't want to attend the wedding, she could leave with James. Then I requested her to leave my room so that I could sleep. When I awoke the next morning, my mother was not there. I told everyone close to me about what happened the night before, including my immediate family, spouse, and bridesmaids. I knew I'd be busy for the rest of the day, so there was no time to ponder about her. Looking back, I'm grateful for it because it would have probably ruined my mood. My father and stepmother eventually walked me down the aisle, and a few people exchanged puzzled looks, but no one said anything because it was clear I wanted it to be a happy day without any issues. I like my stepmother, so I didn't mind when she walked me down the aisle, and the wedding went well. But, 1 hour before the celebrations were to conclude, my mother arrived at the reception with James, and she had a really embarrassed expression on her face, so I knew she was there to apologize. I had been drinking, and I was overjoyed from just getting married, so I didn't mind her returning for the reception and was more than willing to forgive her. I accepted her apology and told her she may join everyone else. Instead, she stayed by our side and explained that she had a favor to ask. She asked us to rework the wedding ceremony so she could be a part of it as well. My husband and I were both stunned by the absurdity of the request, and we instantly denied. But then she began pleading with us, and even James was concerned. He said that she needed us to do this as a favor because otherwise, my grandmother would cut her off. Both of my father's parents attended the wedding, but my grandmother, my mother's only surviving parent, was unable to attend due to her out-of-state residence and medical concerns that precluded her from traveling. I promised my grandmother I'd send her a video of the wedding. While my mother and James were driving home, my grandmother video called my mother to chat with me. That's when my mother realized she had made a mistake, and she was now worried about what her mother would think about her actions during my wedding. That's why she asked me to recreate the ceremony so she could be a part of it and my grandmother wouldn't find out what occurred. My mother honestly thought it was a reasonable answer because the venue was still paid for, the decorations were up and the majority of the guests hadn't left yet. But I held firm and informed my mother that she chose to leave the previous night and it was her fault. I was not going to restart my wedding only to correct her mistake. She began arguing, insisting that we do things her way so that her mother would not cut her off. My grandmother loves family relationships, and the only reason she couldn't go was health. If she found out my mother had done anything so dumb, she would not hesitate to cut her off. Because I am her only grandchild and she cherishes me, everyone knew she would be devastated if she found out what my mother had done. That's why my mother was so determined to resolve the matter before my grandmother found out. I wasn't in the mood for a battle with my mother, and my grandmother kept attempting to video call her. So I phoned my maid of honor, took my phone from her, and before my mother could say or do anything, I FaceTimed my grandmother to tell her the truth. I had had enough of my mother's moaning. My grandmother was delighted to see me, and after a brief discussion about the wedding, I got right to the issue. I told her exactly what had happened to my mother and how she wanted me to restart the wedding especially for her. I did all of this in front of my mother, who was frozen in place. When I turned the phone around so my grandmother could face her, my mother said nothing. My grandmother raged at her for a full 6 minutes, expressing her disappointment. She informed my mother that she did not need to return home for the holidays and did not want to speak with her until I had forgiven her. Only then would she contemplate making amends with my mother again. After my grandmother hung up, my mother and James remained there, speechless. I expected them to have an outburst, but they didn't. They simply went after a few minutes without saying anything, which was ideal because throwing a tantrum would have wrecked the rest of the reception. We decided not to talk about my mother or James for the remainder of the evening so that they would not ruin it for us. My grandmother called the day after the wedding, after we had returned home, to discuss all that had happened. She revealed that she had been having problems with my mother for some months as a result of her decision to marry James. My grandmother had been extremely opposed to my mother's fast marriage from the start because they had only known each other for a few months. She didn't think it was wise for my mother to rush into a marriage like that, which made sense. But my mother paid no heed to her. They didn't talk for a few months after the wedding because my grandmother called it a bad decision, and my mother took offense. After a few months, my mother apologized and went to visit my grandmother with James to make things right. Despite my grandmother's kindness, James remained apart from her. He pretended he was too good to converse with her, rejecting all of her attempts to get to know him. This gave my grandmother a negative impression of him, and she began to dislike him even more after that visit. She told my mother about her fears, and they argued throughout the last few months. My mother kept playing the same card, claiming that her parents thought my father was the appropriate guy for her, but marrying him proved to be the worst mistake of her life. She felt my grandmother was unwilling to give James a fair chance because they hadn't been together long. My grandmother believed she had given him a fair chance, emphasizing that her problems were with the hasty nature of the marriage, not James as a person. However, James took it personally and continued his attitude, resulting in increased tension. Things had been strained between my mother and grandmother for months, and the recent FaceTime call on the day of my wedding was the final straw for my grandmother. She couldn't believe my mother skipped my wedding simply because I refused to let James lead me down the aisle. We had no idea whether James or my mother had come up with this concept, but it made no difference. My mother chose to miss my wedding, then pretended it never happened and wanted me to recreate everything so my grandmother would not find out. After discussing it, my grandmother and I understood that my mother had taken both of us for granted. We resolved not to speak with her for a few months until we were ready to forgive her or she really apologized. My grandmother wrote a message to my mother on our behalf, asking her not to contact us until we were ready to communicate and hoping she would respect that. I thought this was a decent answer, but my mother began blaming me for everything. She wrote me nasty messages last night, claiming that it was my fault that her own mother was not speaking to her. She remarked that if I didn't want to redo the wedding, I could have simply said so, which I did several times. She accused me of intentionally escalating the situation by involving my grandmother. She felt that I didn't need to tell my grandmother and give her more reasons to be furious with her. My mother thought I was ganging up on her by recruiting my grandmother, and she thought it was unjust. She did not think I should have dragged my grandmother into our argument. I think she's simply whining, but she could have a point. Is it my fault for bringing my grandmother into this conflict with my mother? Update 1. Thank you to everyone who provided positive comments on my post. I've decided to block my mother and end this nonsense. I don't need to put up with her conduct anymore. She's been acting strangely since she started dating James, and I don't need such negativity in my life. My husband and I are heading to Paris for our honeymoon next week, and I want to enjoy ourselves without worrying about my mother. Blocking her means that I don't hear from her throughout this period. I've always tried to treat Mom with the same love and respect that I've shown my father, but after all of this, I no longer feel bound to do so. My father has always treated me better, so I don't think it's wrong to stop treating her equally. I discussed everything with my grandmother, father, and husband, and they all believe that barring her is the proper decision. Most of them say I should have blocked her a long time ago, perhaps on the day of the wedding itself. But I delayed because it was difficult for me to let go of the concept of having a nice relationship with my mother. It now has to be completed. I can't let her treat me this way and get away with it, and I'm going to make sure I put my foot down now. Update 2. Hello everyone. Well, my hubby and I are departing for our honeymoon tomorrow. I must have told it to my mother at some point, as she appeared to remember. I'm not sure how I feel about what just transpired, but I'm going to post it here because I feel compelled to keep you all informed. In my previous update, I noted that I had blocked my mother everywhere, so she sent an email to my work email address, which I had not blocked. I didn't expect her to contact me there, so I was thrown off guard. I had intended to delete the email, but curiosity got the better of me, and I ended up reading it with my spouse. We both felt strange at the conclusion because my mother expressed her love for me and apologized for her recent actions in the email. She explained that the only reason she wanted James to lead me down the aisle was because he insisted. She claimed it was not her idea and even attempted to postpone the wedding for a few months to get to know him better. James put pressure on her, and the night before the wedding, he twisted her into believing that if my father walked me down the aisle instead of him, people would misinterpret it. She supported him throughout the email because she loved him, but she also expressed regret over everything. She felt torn between James and her family, and she could now relate to how I felt as a child of divorce. She acknowledged James's tendency to be controlling, but she didn't mind it. After chatting for a few days, they both agreed that his domineering nature had produced problems in the family. He committed to work on it, and she pledged to stand up for herself rather than be a doormat. She closed the email by wishing us well and expressing her want to reconnect once we returned from our honeymoon. What worries me isn't the apology, it's that James might not be the appropriate guy for my mother. Although she stated that they will work on it, the way she characterized James gave me the impression that something was wrong and that she was covering for him. My husband and I are going tomorrow. So we cannot deal with this right now. We decided to let her handle the situation. I notified my father, who, regardless of his feelings for my mother, would never harm her since he is a wonderful person. I also told one of her closest friends, whom she has known since childhood, and I'm convinced she would not gossip. With her friend and my father informed, I feel certain that my mother will be cared for and that I will be able to enjoy a worry-free honeymoon. Update 3. Hello, this is going to be a brief update. I last posted an update around 4 months ago, just before leaving for my honeymoon. We intended to deal with whatever was going on with my mother and James when we returned, but when I emailed my mother following our return, I never received a response. Her friends informed me she appeared to be happy, so I figured everything was okay and moved on with my work. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, and I heard from my mom again. She thanked me for telling her friend about my concerns about James, especially because she lacked the guts to express them herself. It turns out I was correct. James was not the ideal guy for her. He had tried to isolate her from everyone, even urging her to cut links with a childhood acquaintance. After she repeatedly canceled plans with her friend challenged her, and my mother eventually broke down and told everything. James had been treating her horribly, and she couldn't take it any longer. She filed for divorce with the help of a friend and has been living with them ever since. My mother thanked me for looking out for her and informing her friend about my concerns. Without that, she doubted anyone would have noticed what was going on. I'm pleased she's getting out of the situation, and I hope we can all assist her move forward. Even my grandmother was surprised, but we're all doing our best to support my mother. We simply hope that things improve from here. Parents kicked me out because of my sister's pregnancy. Now, they're reaching out a year later to mend things, but I've moved on. My parents kicked me, 19F, out of my house almost a year ago, just a few weeks after turning 18. That wasn't even the worst part. It happened during finals week in high school, and I had nowhere to go. Fortunately, I have good friends since my best friend and her parents took me in, and I am quite grateful to them. My parents kicked me out because my older sister became pregnant, and they thought she needed to move back home so she could be well cared for. She is not even my whole biological sister. She is a half-sister. My mother had been dating my stepfather, Jacob, while they were in college, and she became pregnant a few months before graduation. However, she was too young at the time and chose not to marry him. It was only a fling, and they split up. Jacob, on the other hand, remained determined to be a father, so they co-parented Sasha, my half-sister, and maintained contact. When Sasha was 3, my mother met my biological father. They dated for 2 years before marrying. 1 year into their marriage, she became pregnant with me. However, my father was not prepared and wanted to end the pregnancy. My mother refused, and they separated ways. After my father abandoned my pregnant mother, she severed all relations with him and his family before reconciling with Jacob. My father had passed away by the time I was born, and my mother and Jacob reared me. They married a few years after her divorce from my father was finalized, but I never regarded Jacob as a family member because he never treated me as such. I guess Jacob reunited with my mother while she was pregnant with me because he still loved her and wanted to be on her good side. But to him, I was always a burden. He'd been frigid to me since I was a child, and Sasha treated me similarly. While I got along well with my mother, I never developed a bond with Jacob or Sasha, despite the fact that we lived as a family. They always treated me as an outsider. My mother has always claimed to love me as much as they do, but I've never felt that way. She never acknowledged our estrangement, and despite my attempts to connect with them when I was younger, I was always rejected. As I grew older, I saw what was going on and gave up on pursuing a relationship with Jacob and Sasha. I shouldn't have been surprised when they kicked me out because Sasha was expecting and wanted to move back in. However, it came as a shock. I should have known that Sasha would always be Jacob's priority, no matter how much older she was than me. Still, I hoped my mother would defend me, but she didn't. Sasha approached me around a year ago, just 2 days before finals week, and informed me that she was pregnant. She was 24 at the time, which made her 6 years older than me. Despite this, my parents decided to kick me out to create a place for her and help her save money. Sasha and her boyfriend, who had been together since high school, lived in a little apartment not far from our house. I thought it was appropriate for her to remain there, but she wanted to return home. She didn't feel safe remaining in the apartment alone because she works from home and her partner has to travel for work on occasion. She wanted to move back in with her parents while pregnant to avoid being alone and save money on rent. Her boyfriend was also planning to move in with her at our apartment. So Sasha and my parents decided she would return home. That would have been okay with me, but they informed me I had to vacate my room for a few months since they required it for her. Sasha already had a room in our house, but after she left for college, Jacob converted it into an office. My parents informed me she couldn't stay in the living room, therefore the only option was for me to give up my room. They asked that I think of it as a sacrifice for my family. I might not have been as upset if they hadn't had this chat with me immediately before my first exam. I was already stressed from preparing for tests and I had a lot of exams coming up in the next 2 weeks. They only worried about Sasha and her pregnancy. I put my foot down and told them I wasn't leaving because Sasha had never treated me like family, so I didn't need to make any sacrifices for her. My parents attempted to reason with me, but I believed they were being unreasonable, and we argued until they snapped. Jacob told me I had to leave by the end of the week or I'd be tossed out, and no one could stop him because I was an adult. He stated that he had the right to decide whether or not I may stay at his place. I expected my mother to protect me, but instead she sided with Jacob. She stated they needed to make room for their real grandkids, and didn't have the time or energy to argue with me about it. She told me to do as I was told. My mom's use of the word real grandkids reaffirmed what I had already felt and known for years. My mom, Sasha, and Jacob were their own little family, and I had always been an outsider. I was really unhappy and decided to begin packing my things right away, oblivious to the fact that I had an exam the following day. They didn't even try to stop me as I departed, revealing where their priorities lay. I ended up on my best friend's doorstep. When I explained everything to her and her parents, they invited me to stay with them as long as I wanted. Many of you may wonder why I didn't ask for support from family members, but I don't know any. Jacob's family is exactly like him. They don't like me at all, and I knew addressing them would be futile. They would do everything they could to avoid helping me. My mother's side of the family is also unfamiliar to me. Apparently, her parents and the rest of the family abandoned her when she became pregnant with Sasha. They wanted her to concentrate on her studies and did not want her to continue with the pregnancy because she was too young. She did it anyhow, and no one has spoken to her since. They weren't even present for her wedding to my father, nor for Sasha's or my birth, as she told me. So since I had no relatives, I turned to my pals. After I was kicked out and moved in with my best friend and her family, I was continually expecting my mother to contact me. I had no such expectations of Jacob or Sasha because I knew they didn't care about me and were probably relieved I left because I never fit into their perfect family. What really hurt me was that my mother didn't contact me. After a few months, I gave up hope completely. A full year has passed since then, and I've heard from a few people that Sasha gave birth a few months back. She and her boyfriend have been sharing how pleased they are to be parents to their baby. The 3 of them are still living with my parents, perhaps to save money on rent. I honestly couldn't care less about any of it. I've been working on improving my own life. After I graduated from high school, I needed to figure out how to get to college. With little contact with my parents, I also lacked money. My best friend's parents had graciously allowed me to live rent-free, but I couldn't ask them to pay for my schooling, especially since they had 2 children of their own. I was anxious, but fortunately, I had applied for several scholarships. Because I'm a good student, I was able to obtain a scholarship from one of the institutions I applied to. It wasn't my first or even second choice, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to save money. Sasha already had a room in our house, but after she left for college, Jacob converted it into an office. My parents informed me that she could not stay in the living room, so the only logical choice was for me to give up my room. They begged me to consider it a sacrifice for my family. If they hadn't told me this just before my first exam, I wouldn't have been so unhappy. I was already nervous about studying for my examinations, which were due in the following 2 weeks, but they seemed to be more concerned with Sasha and her pregnancy. I put my foot down and told them I wasn't leaving since Sasha had never treated me like family, so I didn't feel obligated to make any sacrifices for her. My parents attempted to reason with me, but I believed they were being unreasonable, and we argued until they snapped. Jacob told me that I had to go by the end of the week or I would be tossed out because I was legally an adult and he had the right to decide whether I stayed in his house or not. I expected my mother to protect me, but she sided with Jacob. She explained that they needed to make room for their real grandkids, and did not have the time or energy to argue with me about it. Hearing her refer to Sasha's children as real grandkids, reinforced what I had assumed for years. My mother, Sasha, and Jacob had their own small family, and I had always been the outsider. I was so unhappy that I started packing my things right away, ignoring the fact that I had a test the next day. They didn't even try to stop me as I departed, revealing where their priorities lay. I landed up at my best friend's house, and after explaining everything to her and her parents, they invited me to stay with them as long as I needed. You might wonder why I didn't ask other family members for assistance, but I don't really have any. Jacob's family dislikes me, so I knew it would be fruitless to seek assistance. I never knew anyone on my mother's side of the family. My mother always told me that when she became pregnant with Sasha, her family cut her off because they wanted her to focus on her studies. They didn't want her to get pregnant since she was too young, but she did anyway, and no one has spoken to her since. They weren't even present for her wedding to my father, let alone either of our births, according to her. So I didn't think I had any relatives to turn to, so I went to my pals instead. After I was kicked out and moved in with my best friend and her family, I kept expecting my mother to contact me. I had no such expectations of Jacob or Sasha, as they clearly didn't care about me and were probably relieved that I had left. What pained me the most was that my mother did not reach out at all. After a few months, I gave up hope completely. It has been a year since then. I found out from friends that Sasha had given birth a few months ago and that she and her boyfriend have been posting about their new life as delighted parents. They are still living with my parents, probably to economize on rent. I honestly don't care about any of that stuff anymore. I've been working on improving my own life. After graduating from high school, I needed to figure out how to get to college. It wasn't easy without having my parents' financial assistance. My best friend's parents were generous enough to let me live rent-free, but I couldn't ask them to pay for my tuition, especially since they had 2 children of their own. I was apprehensive, but thankfully, I had applied for numerous scholarships, and because I was a brilliant student, I was awarded one. It was not my first or even second choice of education, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to save money. The scholarship covered 60% of my tuition. So I chose to get a student loan alongside my closest friend's parents as co-signers. I promised them that they wouldn't have to worry about repaying the debt because I would work while studying and pay it off myself. That is what I have been doing. It's been difficult, but knowing I'm succeeding on my own is wonderful. I hadn't heard from my family in a year and I wasn't expecting them to seek out. Surprisingly, approximately a week ago, my mother emailed me and asked me to come home for the weekend. She claimed she missed me, as did Jacob and Sasha, and they wanted to reconcile with me. She stated they were aware they had treated me unfairly. In the email, my mother was unusually charming, faking sincerity. Call it gut instinct, but I sensed something was wrong and did not answer. A few days later, she wrote another email, which I disregarded as well, despite my need to find out what was going on. I realized there had to be another reason. It was improbable they would suddenly feel sorry a year after kicking me out. It looked overly convenient. I received my response 2 days ago, when my maternal grandparents contacted me. I was surprised they were able to contact me, as I was certain my parents had not given them my information. They explained that they had to inquire around and eventually obtained my phone number from one of my high school acquaintances, who trusted them enough to disclose it. It turned out to be my best buddy, and I'm glad she didn't tell me since it was a welcome surprise. My grandparents called, and I couldn't believe it was them. I've never known them, seen them, or heard their voices. I was hesitant at first, but then they FaceTimed me and showed me old photo albums of my mother from her childhood and adolescent years. That's when I started to believe they were my grandparents. We all got rather emotional. I'm not sure why, but I just did. We began talking, and I shared details about my life. I tried to avoid talking about my parents, but it was pointless because they already knew everything. They claimed that one of the main reasons they had not contacted me before was because of my parents. They recently discovered the truth, which prompted them to contact us. I was perplexed. My mother had always told me that when she became pregnant with Sasha, my grandparents cut her off. That was everything I knew. However, there was more to the story. My grandparents emphasized that they were not opposed to my mother having Sasha. Rather, they opposed her connection with Jacob. My mother had lied about her parents to safeguard Jacob's reputation. My grandparents had been supportive of her pregnancy and informed her she had the freedom to choose. However, they did not approve of Jacob because he was a well-known addict. They had all grown up in the same area, attended the same high school, and even went to the same college, so my grandparents were well aware of Jacob's background. They promised my mother that they would financially assist her during and after the pregnancy, but only if she broke up with Jacob. They didn't want him to influence her. After much thinking, my mother ended their relationship because Jacob couldn't get his life in order. My grandparents took complete custody of Sasha once she was born, and Jacob had only supervised visitation privileges for the first few years. Jacob eventually finished his degree and became clean, but he relapsed every several months, so my grandparents never trusted him completely. They introduced my mother to my father, who is the son of a family friend. After a few years of seeing one another on and off, my mother married him because she had given up hope that Jacob would ever recover. But it appears she has never completely moved on from Jacob. A year into her marriage, she began an affair with him and became pregnant again. At that time, my mother had to tell my father about the affair since she couldn't picture her life without Jacob. Now that she was pregnant, she needed to tell him the truth. Her infidelity was the reason she got a divorce from my father and later married Jacob. So everything Mom said about my father's opposition to having me was a lie. After I was born, many paternity tests were performed, and I was happily not Jacob's child. I was, in fact, my biological father's daughter, which was a relief because I had no desire to be Jacob's biological daughter. My father even had partial custody of me for a period, although I scarcely remember it because it was so long ago. Unfortunately, my biological father died in a vehicle accident when I was 7 months old, allowing my mother to lie to me for the remainder of my life. My father's side of the family refused to have anything to do with me after his death, which was convenient for my mother. My grandparents were really disturbed when they discovered my mother was having an affair with Jacob. They gave her another ultimatum. She could either shut Jacob out of her life completely and focus on her marriage with my father, or she could get a divorce and never speak to them again. This time, my mother chose Jacob because he had been clean for about a year, longer than any of his previous stints. That was the final major disagreement my mother had with her parents. My mother was still pregnant at the time, and they did not communicate again until after my birth. My grandparents ultimately softened and decided to contact her so they could meet me, but Jacob refused to play along and form a happy family with them because of how they had treated him. So my mother turned down their attempts to reunite. My grandparents did not give up, however. They attempted to contact my mother every several months, but she never accepted them back into her life. This continued on for years until Jacob and my mother had financial difficulties and were unable to pay their rent. My mother had no one else to turn to, so she contacted her parents. In a great gesture, my grandparents gave her a house, hoping that it would bring them closer together. It was about 6 years ago when my family moved into our new home. It was a great improvement over the apartment we used to live in. I'd often wondered how my parents could afford such a wonderful property in such a desirable neighborhood, given that my mother was a receptionist and Jacob worked in sales. His company had been failing, so it seemed unlikely that they could afford it. I now realize that was all thanks to my grandparents. Despite this, my parents, being the ungrateful people they are, did not attempt to repair their relationship with my grandparents. Both my mother and Jacob were aware that my grandparents had paid for the house, but my mother insisted that they were not ready to reconnect and needed time to think about it. My grandparents, being naive, gave them room for a few months, but when my mother did not respond, they tried again. She kept claiming that she needed more time. This went on for years, and my grandparents eventually admitted that perhaps it wasn't meant to be. They were getting older and told me how humiliating it was to continually attempting to contact their daughter only to be denied each time. They finally admitted to my mother that they understood why she no longer wanted to be around them and regretted themselves for not being gentler in the past. The only thing they wanted was that my mother continue to send photos of our family so that they knew we were doing fine. Surprisingly, my mother agreed, and for the past few years, that was how my grandparents stayed in touch, which was quite sad. They told me everything, and I burst into tears. I had always thought of them as villains, but that was not the case. Now, as for how they discovered the truth. My grandfather just had a health scare with heart problems, and he and my grandma realized they couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Because they weren't getting any younger, they wanted to make one final attempt to reconcile with the family before passing away. They stopped by my mother's house a few weeks ago, which is technically still theirs because they paid for it and their names are on the deed. When they came, my mother had no choice but to welcome and entertain them. They discovered they were great-grandparents when Sasha had her children. But when they asked about me, my parents became really uneasy and had no idea what to say. So they informed my grandparents that I was away at college and that it might not be a good time to contact me because I was in a vulnerable state due to examinations. They couldn't even come up with a false college name, which led my grandparents to suspect something was up. They had a gut feeling that my parents had made a mistake, so they left the house to speak with our neighbors. That is how they discovered that I had not been living with my parents for the past year after being kicked out. The neighbors didn't know why, but their son, who went to school with me, informed my grandparents that I had been staying with my closest friend's family for a while, and they could know more. That's how my grandparents got in touch with my best buddy, and they eventually found out what happened to me. Naturally, they were furious when they discovered the truth. My grandparents informed my mother that she and her family would need to evacuate the house in order to make room for their only real grandchild. It was the epitome of retaliation, using the identical things my parents had used to me. My best friend ensured that my grandparents knew just how to press that nerve. It now became clear why my parents were attempting to reach out and make amends. They were going to lose their home. My grandparents waited a few days to approach me after learning everything because they were concerned about how I would respond. They eventually decided to go forward with it since they had wasted so many years worrying about how my mother would respond, and they wanted to do the right thing now. However, my grandparents also wanted to give me the freedom to choose what I wanted. They told me that if I wanted to give my family another chance, they could continue to live in the house. But if I wanted them to leave, that is what would happen. Apparently, when they came, no one in the family seemed pleased to see them, and I was the only one who appeared truly interested in developing a relationship with them. My grandparents refused to be taken for fools anymore, so I had to decide whether I wanted my parents to have a home or not. If I'm being honest, I suppose I want them tossed out, but that sounds a little harsh. I'm not sure whether that's the appropriate thing to do. What if I told my grandparents I wanted to kick my family out? Update 1. Hello, first and foremost, thank you for all of your encouraging words. It means everything to me, and I appreciate it more than I can express. Regarding my decision, I've concluded that I do want my family to leave that house. I told my grandparents a few days ago, and now they're evicting my family. Of course, there's a lot of legal stuff involved, which my grandparents say I don't need to worry about. My parents have also been emotionally manipulative, particularly Sasha, but my grandparents are impervious to it. After speaking with me, they learned about all the falsehoods my mother had been spreading and how she had poisoned their grandchildren against them. They have no more sympathy for my parents. To be honest, Sasha and her partner are working grown-ups, so I'm confident they'll find something out, just like millions of others. The same applies for my parents. I don't feel guilty about any of it. After all, they didn't feel horrible about kicking me out, knowing I was just 18 and still in school. Despite this, I was able to perform well academically, even though it occurred just before my exams. I urged my grandparents not to worry about my college tuition, but they insisted on handling the student loan I had taken out. They also apologized for not being present for me sooner. We have a lot to talk about and make up for, but everything is going great right now. Update 2. Hello, my grandparents began evicting my family a few weeks back, and they have till the end of next month to depart. My mother is not pleased about it. She felt compelled to inform me, writing an email a few weeks ago in an attempt to regain my trust and heal things, most likely so her parents wouldn't kick her out. The email was quite different from the one I had received before. This one was full of swear words, saying she wished she hadn't given birth to me. She even said she wishes I had been in the vehicle accident with my father, so we might both have died. So that's my mom for you. But it no longer bothers me since, to me, she is not family. If I'm being honest, my only family now consists of my grandparents, my best friend, her parents, and a few relatives whom my grandparents are introducing me to. My mother broke them off long ago since she didn't want anything to do with her family. It's an unusual scenario, but I'm adjusting. Update 3. Hello, the holidays have just begun, and I'm back home in my old house. It feels strange to be here, but my grandparents have been living in the house since my family departed, and they've done an excellent job of renovating it. Even my room seems like home again. We'll be throwing a Thanksgiving dinner shortly, and we've invited some family members, my best friend, and her parents. I feel like my life is finally getting back on track. I'm very happy, and I wish I could stay this way forever.